Ruangan ini dilengkapi peralatan sistem proteksi kebakaran berupa heat and smoke detector, water sprinkler system, alarm sistem otomatis, alat pemadam api ringan, fire hydrant system, dan kotak P3K. Di dalam ruangan ini tidak diperbolehkan merokok, mengonsumsi minuman keras, obat terlarang, membawa senjata api, senjata tajam, dan bahan peledak. Perhatikan letak pintu darurat di sekitar Anda. Di dalam ruangan ini terdapat 5 pintu darurat menuju akses ke titik kumpul pada saat kondisi darurat. 1 pintu utama berada di sisi belakang Anda, 2 pintu berada di sisi kanan Anda, dan 2 pintu berada di sisi kiri Anda. Apabila terdengar bunyi alarm dan terjadi keadaan darurat seperti kebakaran dan gempa bumi, segera lakukan evakuasi diri Anda menuju pintu darurat. Dalam kondisi darurat, tidak diperbolehkan menggunakan lift. Dan jangan panik, segera keluar dari ruangan, ikuti instruksi petugas keamanan yang bertugas, serta perhatikan rambu evakuasi yang menuntun Anda menuju ke titik kumpul. Titik kumpul berada di parkir timur, dekat pos pintu masuk mobil dan plaza terbuka. Kami harapkan keamanan dan keselamatan Anda dapat terjamin. Tidak ada yang lebih penting dari jiwa manusia. Terima kasih atas perhatian Anda.
Selamat datang, kami ucapkan kepada Bapak Adil Makso selaku Direktur Manajemen Risiko PT PLN Persero. Selamat datang di Sustainability Day 2026. We would like to welcome Head of the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, Mr. Matthew David Johnson Aiden. Welcome to PT PLN Persero. Kamu menyambut yang tamu undangan lainnya juga.
Dan kami juga turut menyambut seluruh tamu undangan yang berbahagia. Terima kasih sudah berkenan hadir dan selamat datang di PT PLN Persero.
Itu aku langsung. Apa Indonesia Raya kamu ya? Ya udah aku aja. Selamat pagi kami ucapkan kepada seluruh tamu undangan Sustainability Day 2026. Kami persilahkan untuk segera menempati tempat duduk yang telah disediakan, karena kita akan segera memulai kegiatan pada pagi hari ini. Sekali lagi kami persilahkan kepada Bapak dan Ibu yang masih belum menempati tempat duduk, kami mohon kesediaannya untuk dapat menempati tempat duduk yang telah disediakan, karena kita akan segera memulai rangkaian kegiatan Sustainability Day 2026. Terima kasih. Selamat datang kami ucapkan kepada Direktur Utama PT PLN Persero, Bapak Darmawan Prasojo.
Ini ya. Hadirin yang berbahagia, untuk meningkatkan rasa cinta tanah air, marilah kita menyanyikan lagu kebangsaan Indonesia Raya. Hadirin dimohon berdiri.
Please rise for the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya.
Mohon dipersilahkan duduk kembali.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may now be seated. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ya, selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua.
Good morning ladies and gentlemen, Shalom Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan.
Yang terhormat, Head of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, Mr. Matthew David Jensen Naidan.
Yang kami hormati, Direktur Utama PT PLN Persero Bapak Darmawan Prasojo, beserta jajaran direksi PT PLN Persero.
Deputy Director of the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership United Nations Officer for Project Services or UNOPS, Mr. John Cotton.
We would also like to welcome Deputy Head of Mission Swedish Embassy, Ms. Angelica Lejenberg.
Ketua Harian Tim Khusus Perancangan Aksi Transisi Energi Nasional, Bapak Edo Mahendra.
We would also like to welcome Chief Sustainability Officer for Sweco Group, Mr. Andreas Gyllenhammar.
UN Women Representative Indonesia and a Liaison for ASEAN, Ms. Ulvisren Jamsran.
Welcome Country Director of French Development Agency or AFD, Mr. Jan Marter.
Country Director KfW Development Bank, Mr. Burhard Christen.
Kami juga turut menyambut Asisten Deputi Pengurangan Risiko Bencana Kementerian Koordinator Bidang Pembangunan Manusia dan Kebudayaan, Bapak Andre Noto Hamijoyo. Beserta tentunya Bapak dan Ibu hadirin yang tidak dapat kami sebutkan satu persatu.
Puji syukur marilah kita panjatkan kehadirat Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, karena berkat karunia-Nya kita semua dapat diberikan kesempatan untuk berkumpul dalam acara
Sustainability Day 2026. Sustainability Day 2026 mengangkat tema Empowering Climate Resilience. Dan perkenalkan, saya Saurin.
Dan saya Fitri, kami selaku Master of Ceremony yang akan memandu jalannya acara pada hari ini.
Dan untuk mengetahui lebih lanjut terkait dengan Sustainability Day 2026, marilah kita saksikan bersama tayangan berikut ini. Selamat menyaksikan.
Bumi memanas, cuaca tak lagi dapat diprediksi. Perubahan iklim bukan lagi cerita masa depan, melainkan realitas hari ini. Dan dampaknya nyata. Bencana hidrologi di Aceh dan Sumatera menjadi pengingat bahwa krisis iklim telah hadir di depan mata. Mengganggu sistem ketenaga listrikan dan berdampak langsung pada keberlangsungan bisnis. Di tengah tekanan tersebut, transisi energi menjadi keharusan. Sebuah langkah penting untuk menjaga keberlanjutan bisnis sekaligus memastikan masa depan yang lebih bersih.
Kita perlu membangun strategi untuk mencapai swasembada energi. Tetapi ini harus dibalance bagaimana kita juga mengurangi emisi gas rumah kaca. Maka tugas PLN ini menjadi lebih kompleks. Kalau dulu hanya menyediakan listrik, hari ini adalah we need to provide affordable but clean energy. We need to balance between growth and juga environmental sustainability. Itulah yang kita sebut dengan transition of energy.
PLN terus bergerak, mengembangkan energi baru terbarukan, membangun ekosistem kendaraan listrik, memperkuat digitalisasi sistem kelistrikan, serta menurunkan emisi. Di saat yang sama, PLN juga membangun fondasi keberlanjutan yang inklusif dengan keterlibatan Serikandi PLN pada lini terdepan, serta membuka ruang kolaborasi yang lebih luas dan memastikan setiap peran menjadi bagian dari solusi. Namun, itu belum cukup. PLN terus memperkuat adaptasi pada sistem ketenaga listrikan melalui pemetaan risiko iklim serta penerapan langkah teknis. Antara lain, peninggian peralatan di area rawan banjir, pembuatan tanggul penahan, penguatan sistem proteksi petir, penanaman mangrove, dan berbagai upaya teknis lainnya untuk meningkatkan keandalan pasokan listrik di tengah meningkatnya risiko perubahan iklim. Untuk itu, Sustainability Day 2026 hadir menghubungkan ide, inovasi, pembiayaan, dan kebijakan untuk memperkuat ketahanan masa depan. Dari rentan menjadi tangguh, dari reaktif menjadi adaptif, dari menghadapi krisis menjadi memimpin perubahan. Empowering Climate Resilience.
Hadirin yang berbahagia, selanjutnya kita akan menyimak bersama kata sambutan sekaligus pembuka kegiatan Sustainability Day 2026 yang akan disampaikan oleh Direktur Utama PT PLN Persero Bapak Darmawan Prasojo. Jalan ke Garut yang penuh dengan belokan, kepada Bapak Dirut dengan hormat kami persilahkan.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Ada manisan dari rambutan, siap saji di atas nampan. Kita berjuang membangun keberlanjutan agar terus dikdaya semakin kuat di masa depan. Our distinguished guests and also our distinguished strategic partners. Mr. Matthew David Johnson, thank you. Swedish Embassy, Ms. Angelica, thank you. UN Women Representative to ASEAN, Ms. Ulzi Zuren Jamsran, thank you. UNOP Southeast Asia, Mr. John Cotton, thank you. SWICO Chief Sustainability Officer, Mr. Andreas Geilenhammer, thank you. Strategic Partners, AFD, Mr. Jan Martres, thank you. KFW, Mr. Burkhard Hinz, thank you. And also from Kemenko PMK, Pak Andre, terima kasih. Transition of Energy Nasional, Pak Edo Mahindra, thank you. Seluruh BOD PT PLN Persero yang hadir di sini, Sohibul Bait Pak Epi Haryadi, terima kasih atas acaranya. Dari subholding anak perusahaan, seluruh mitra dan tamu undangan yang hadir, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya Allah ya Tuhanku, hari ini kita mendapatkan keberkahan, yaitu Sustainability Day 2026 sekaligus merayakan Hari Kartini Nasional. Kartini Nasional is the Women Empowerment Day. And I already told the leader of the Sri Kandi, can we make the Kartini Day every day? And she negotiated only 5 times a year, wearing the national, kebaya and also jarik, and making it the symbol that woman empowerment in PLN is getting stronger. Applause for all of us. The earth is warming. For each kilowatt hour of electricity, there is emission of the greenhouse gas emission. Each liter of gasoline and diesel fuel, there is greenhouse gas emission. It's faster than we anticipated before. And the future of the next generation might be compromised. and is global climate change, is global warming. It's not local warming, it's global. Why? Because the damage effect of the warming is threatening the survival, not only Indonesian, not only European, not only Japanese, not only Singaporean, not only American, but it's threatening the future of humankind. So we, not only as Indonesian, as humankind, need to shift from fragmented strategy to become unified strategy. We as humankind need to slow down the warming if it's possible, even to cool the earth. How are we going to be able to translate this into action? We need to transition from fossil-based development to renewable-based development. As a country, we need to create more jobs. We need to accelerate growth. The only way for the country to be competitive is if we can provide affordable energy. This is becoming a complex challenge. How are we going to be able to provide affordable energy? Why? To design a new ecosystem that is conducive for new investment, new economic activities, that are going to create more jobs, to eradicate poverty, and to accelerate growth. But in the same time, how we are able to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. In the dynamics, complexity of global geopolitics, now we understand the energy security becoming the highest priority in the energy strategy. And that's the mission of President Prabowo Subianto. Now we're talking about shifting from import-based energy to domestic-based energy to improve our energy security. This is what we call the multiple and sometimes at a time conflicting goals. And our job is how we're going to be able to streamline all of these previously multiple conflicting goals to become unified goals. Now, can we restate our mission? We're going to provide affordable but clean energy. In the same time, shifting from import-based to domestic-based energy. From expensive to cheaper energy. From fossil-based to renewable-based energy. From high greenhouse gas emission to low greenhouse gas emissions. In the same time, can we invite more green investment, strengthening our national capacities that are going to be able to create more green jobs, get rid of hunger, accelerate growth, balancing between growth and environmental sustainability. How about the PLN? We need to shift our mindset. We need to shift the way we think, the way we approach all of these challenges. This is one in a lifetime opportunity in which PLN is going to become modernized. From backward-looking company to become forward-looking company. We understand today, because this is global challenge, the only way to move forward is through global solution, through collaboration. Collaboration of policy, collaboration of strategy, collaboration of technological innovation, collaboration of joint investment. And that's why this forum is becoming very important, because it's a platform in which our global strategic partners, local strategic partners, sitting together in this room, addressing all of these challenges to become opportunities. In the process of this transitioning of energy, improving our energy security, PLN is going to be able to ride the wave. This is one in a lifetime platform in which PLN is going to be able to flourish. In the transportation sector, the shifting from the internal combustion engine transportation based on the gasoline and diesel fuel now being replaced by electric vehicle is taking much faster pace than we anticipated before. The transaction of charging of the electric vehicle has been increased by 5-fold in the span of 12 months. Applause for all of us. I'm telling you why. The law of conservation of energy. In the closed system, energy cannot be created nor can be destroyed, but can only be transformed into another form of energy. The transformations of electric energy to kinetic energy is reaching 90% of efficiency, while the transformation of the gasoline and diesel fuel into kinetic energy is only 15 until 17% of efficiency. From electric to kinetic, if you see electric fan, there is no exhaust. If internal combustion engine, there is an exhaust. If you touch the exhaust of a gasoline car, you can feel the heat. That shows the inefficiency of transformation of gasoline to kinetic energy. The reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions, even today, even though we still use part of coal, is already 40%. Reduction of costs, of fuel costs using electric vehicle is 70%. The economics is going to work by magic, working by itself. The use of energy is converging to electric energy. Is this a challenge? Yes, but this is also an opportunity. PLN, through collaboration, is going to prevail. Our previous job was only to provide electricity. But today, our main job is only also to take care of the environment. Taking care the environment to make sure the future of the next generation should be better than ours. Generating electricity is very easy. Burning coal, generating electricity, the technology has been there more than 100 years. But there is SOx, NOx, acid rain, mercury, particulate matters, carbon dioxide. Generating electricity is still easy. Taking care of the environment is very complex. But humankind innovates. Used to be the price of solar energy 25 cents, then becoming 12 cents, then becoming 8 cents, then becoming 5 cents, then becoming 4 point something cents. Battery energy storage system used to be 17 cents, 12 cents, 8 cents. Now could be diminishing to become 4 or 5 cents. Humankind, in the face of adversity, always prevail. Ingenuity. And that's why we have a strong confidence. Again, we're not going to lose the war. We're going to win again. Sustainability Day 2026, empowering climate resilience. This forum giving us a sense of pride. Why? I can see from the expression of the eye of the audience here, previously fragmented stakeholders to become unified. Previously, we had some kind of doubt. Now we have a strong conviction. No matter the challenge ahead, we're going to keep moving forward to get the mission accomplished, to slow down the warming if it's possible, to cool the earth, to make sure that the future of the next generation should be better than ours. And why are we doing this? Yes, there are international climate agreement, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement. But we're doing this not only because of those international climate agreement. We're doing this because we do really care. We do really care that we have only one Earth and we have to survive. We need to reclaim humankind's right to survive. But also, this is going to become long, grueling, complex battle. That's why this is also giving us a sense of humility. And the long battle has just begun. So again, thank you so much. PLN Sustainability Day 2026. The battle has just begun. God bless all of us. We're going to get the mission accomplished. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kami ucapkan kepada Bapak Darmawan Prasojo selaku Direktur Utama PT PLN Persero atas sambutan dan juga arahannya.
Bapak dan Ibu, selanjutnya kita akan menyimak bersama keynote speech yang akan disampaikan oleh Head of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Matthew David Johnson Aiden.
Bapak Damawan Prasojo, President Director of PLN, Board of Directors and senior leaders of PLN, distinguished speakers, development partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, selamat pagi. On behalf of the UN Resident Coordinator and in fact of the whole UN country team, thank you for the opportunity to join you this morning. It's a real privilege and an honor to engage with PLN, an institution that really sits at the heart of Indonesia's development and increasingly at the center of global energy transition. Today's Sustainability Day brings together three powerful ideas. Earth's Day's call to protect our planet, Kartini Day's legacy of leadership and inclusion, and Indonesia's own journey to climate resilience. Together, they remind us that climate resilience is built through leadership, inclusion, and a shared commitment to national progress. Around the world, energy systems are being transformed. Sustainability is no longer a parallel agenda. It's become an organizing principle of energy security, economic competitiveness, and social resilience. And in this transformation, Indonesia stands at a defining moment. As one of the world's largest economies, as the world's largest archipelago, Indonesia's energy choices matter far beyond its borders. They shape regional markets, global emissions trajectories, and confidence in global climate action. And in this context, PLN's role is not only operational, it's strategic. As we just heard, it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Indonesia's energy transition is firmly anchored in its commitments under the Paris Agreement. Through its second nationally determined contribution, Indonesia has reaffirmed its pledge to reduce greenhouse emissions by over 31% unconditionally, and by up to 43% with international support, whilst working towards peaking emissions by 2030 and achieving net zero by 2060 or sooner. Within this national journey, PLN's role is pivotal. It's a critical delivery institution for Indonesia's climate ambition, translating national commitments into action through renewable energy expansion, grid modernization, and improved energy efficiency. The ambition is clear. The challenge and the opportunity lies in rapidly scaling renewable energy. Across solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and marine resources, Indonesia's renewables potential is extraordinary. Harnessing it will unlock new industries, quality green jobs, and lasting energy security. President Prabowo's target to accelerate up to 100 gigawatts of solar sends a powerful signal of intent. And this ambition aligns with Indonesia's power sector transformation, with nearly 2/3 of new capacity expected from renewables. With up to 70% of the investment required expected to come from private capital, the success of Indonesia's power sector transformation will depend not only on public policy, but on the confidence of markets. And in this context, the UN stands ready to support PLN in mobilizing capital markets, including through instruments such as corporate bond issuance, blended finance, and risk-sharing mechanisms that can help crowd in long-term private investment whilst safeguarding public value. Let me highlight three areas where the UN is already working hand-in-hand with PLN to support Indonesia's energy transition, areas where our partnership is adding real value in turning ambition into results on the ground. First, in systems and infrastructure. Through UNOPS-led energy transition partnerships, we're supporting the modernization of the Java-Bali grid, including smart grid infrastructure and the Jamali Control Center in Depok. This strengthens reliability, flexibility, and efficiency. This partnership, now extended through 2028, is supporting critical work on renewable energy, transmission, distribution, and utility-level storage systems. Building on this foundation, together we're exploring next steps, upgrading flexible generation, upgrading distribution systems, and micro-smart grids for island-based systems, extending the smart grid approach beyond Java Bali to strengthen resilience across Indonesia's archipelago. Second, people and access. The transition must be people-centered. And in remote areas, UNDP has supported the installation of 1.1 megawatts of solar mini-grids, bringing reliable power to thousands of households, reducing energy costs by up to 40%, and avoiding 1,800 tons of carbon emissions annually. Critically, nearly half of the local trained operators are women. And third, inclusion and leadership, because a cleaner future is also a more inclusive one. And here Kartini's spirit resonates deeply. I commend PLN for being among the first state-owned enterprises to commit to the women's empowerment principles together with UN Women. PLN's strong performance among the highest WAP scores amongst state-owned enterprises. This demonstrates that gender equality is not only the right thing to do, but it's the driver of institutional excellence and innovation. Initiatives such as maternity and paternity leave, childcare facilities at offices, and the upcoming expansion of care facilities across field offices nationwide set an important benchmark in a critical sector. UN Women stands ready to deepen this collaboration, especially to strengthen communities and women's leadership for resilience around critical power infrastructure during climate shocks. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia understands the realities faced by developing and middle-income countries, balancing growth with climate ambition, affordability with innovation, and sovereignty with global cooperation. This gives Indonesia, and it gives PLN, both the moral authority and the practical credibility. By sharing lessons, partnering across borders, and demonstrating what works at scale, PLN contributes to shaping regional and global pathways for just energy transitions. Leadership today is not about having all of the answers. It's about showing the way, it's about building coalitions, and it's about lifting others as we move forward together. So let this energy transition be our Kartini moment, breaking barriers, expanding opportunity, and building resilient future that truly works for everyone. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson Aiden. We kindly ask you to remain on the stage as we are now going to proceed to the partnership agreement ceremony.
Hadirin yang kami hormati, selanjutnya adalah penyerahan dokumen partnership agreement antara PT PLN Persero dengan UNOPS terkait kajian dan dukungan kegiatan transisi energi.
Dan untuk pertukaran dokumen partnership agreement, kami mengundang Bapak E. Haryadi dari PT PLN Persero, and we would also like to welcome Mr. John Kahn from UNOPS to join us up on the stage.
Kami juga turut mengundang kepada yang terhormat Bapak Darmawan Prasojo selaku Direktur Utama PT PLN Persero, serta Bapak Edo Mahendra selaku Ketua Harian Tim Khusus Perancangan Aksi Transisi Energi Nasional untuk dapat menyaksikan penyerahan dokumen partnership agreement. Untuk penyerahan dokumen partnership agreement yang pertama adalah penyerahan partnership agreement dari PT PLN Persero yang akan diwakili oleh Bapak E. Haryadi kepada UNOPS yang akan diwakili oleh Mr. John Cotton.
And now we would like to ask Mr. John Kahn from UNOPS to hand over the partnership agreement document to PLN, represented by Bapak E. Haryadi. Please give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And we kindly ask you to please remain on the stage as we are going to have a group picture session now. Let's have a group picture with the 5 of you. Give your best smile to the camera in 3, 2, and 1.
Ya, selanjutnya kami mengundang seluruh BOD PLN Holding serta Dirut SHAP untuk dapat bergabung di atas panggung untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama.
Joining us on the stage, the board of directors of PT PLN Persero, as well as the subholding and the subsidiaries of PLN. Baik, kita berikan senyuman terbaik ke kamera. 3, 2, 1. Boleh kepalkan tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian?
Kepalkan tangan.
Kita kepalkan semangat kita. 3, 2, 1.
Dan sekali lagi mungkin dengan PLN terbaiknya Bapak Ibu. 3, 2, 1.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And this is the end of the group photo session. We may now invite you to return to your seat.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, sesi foto bersama telah selesai. Kami persilakan untuk dapat kembali ke tempat. Hadirin yang kami hormati, kita akan memasuki sesi BOD Sustainability Learning Session yang akan mengangkat topik terkait Adaptive Leadership for Sustainability and Infrastructure Resilience.
Ya, dan sesi pembelajaran ini akan disampaikan oleh Chief Sustainability Officer dari Sueco Group. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Andreas Gyllenhammar.
Your Excellencies, President Director Pa Dharmawan, Director of Human Capital, Mr. Yusuf Didi, distinguished members of the board of PLN, UN representatives, Deputy Head of Mission from the Swedish Embassy, senior leaders of PLN, ladies and gentlemen, Selamat pagi. Before we start, let me acknowledge the context we are operating in. Recent geopolitical developments and disruptions in global energy flows, most prominently now, of course, in the Strait of Hormuz, are creating significant uncertainty, not just for energy markets, but for the global economy. And in the light of that, I want to thank you for taking the time to focus on long-term transformation towards a more sustainable energy system in Indonesia, although we are in the middle of very real short-term pressures. Terima kasih. And before we dive into today's strategic conversation, I want to acknowledge something more. PLN has achieved what few energy companies in the world can claim: electrifying almost 100% of a nation. And that is a nation spanning 17,000 islands. It's an extraordinary accomplishment looking from abroad to what you have done. And it will also be the foundation upon which everything I will discuss today is built. My purpose today is not to lecture or to critique. It is to share perspectives from climate science, from peer utilities, and from the practice of leading large-scale transformation on how the system you have built can be future-proofed against climate disruption, shifting markets, and changing expectations from stakeholders. I will be concrete. I will show you what other utilities have done, and I will close with dilemmas and questions that I believe deserve your regular attention as a board and as leaders of PLN. And as I said, this is designed as a strategic conversation, and I welcome your challenges and reflections. Let us begin. So 4 developments makes this conversation urgent, not just for PLN, but for every utility, every major utility in the world. And PLN's unique position as an archipelagic utility in one of the world's most climate-exposed nations makes them more acute. But it also means the opportunities are greater. First, climate volatility. Indonesia recorded almost 7,000 climate-related disasters in 2023 and 2024, affecting over 13 million people. And in March 2025, Jakarta experienced 3-meter floods with hospital evacuations. And in February this year, North Kalimantan was severely flooded. So climate change is not about future projections anymore. These events are today's operating environment for you. Second, markets and investors. We have CDP, we have Sustainalytics, we have TCFD, TNFD, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And these all are reshaping how utilities are evaluated by investors and markets globally. And these metrics that you produce in your annual reports and sustainability reports are directly affecting access to green bonds and JETP financing. And they're aiming to support emerging economies with a just transition away from coal and other fossil fuels. And third, it's about biodiversity. It's the next big thing. Indonesia is one of 17 mega biodiversity countries. When watersheds degrade, hydro output drops. When mangroves are lost, coastal infrastructure is exposed. And TNFD is making nature risk disclosure as important as climate risk. And then fourth, we have the geopolitics. The US withdrew from JETP in March 2025, and now only $3.4 billion of the promised $22 billion has been made available. But Germany and Japan have stepped up. UAE has shown interest in 10 gigawatts of renewables, and the new RUPTL targets 76% renewable capacity. The landscape from my horizon is definitely uncertain, but the direction is clear. The direction is clear. So let me show you how we will use our 70 minutes together. I will set this up for 5 blocks. Let's start with the environmental risk landscape, climate, water, and nature. And then I will share perspectives on adaptive leadership, because that is where you are all heading now. And this is including a reframing of some deeply held assumptions. This is where it might get hot. We will look at infrastructure, resilience, and compounding risks. And I will show you what peer utilities have done, including the most inspiring transformation story I know. And it has implications for PLN. I will share what the evidence says about leading large-scale change. My experience is grounded in climate science and in analyzing global and European energy markets. And I admit that my time to analyze Indonesia in general and PLN in particular has been limited, so I hope that you forgive me if I got some parts of your story wrong or reference some inaccurate data. But I also feel confident from leading a large-scale transformation of energy companies that the overview I have is clear enough to identify what parts of my expertise that is relevant for me to share with you. All the data I will use today will be made available for you after the speech with references, so you can challenge my assumptions and analysis. And finally today, I will close with some considerations I believe this company could pay attention to. And this is designed as an exchange. So every point connects to PLN's business and strategies for the future. And it's regarding your assets, your communities, your capital planning, and your disclosure performance. Let us begin. And we start where all resilience conversations should begin, with an understanding of what we are exposed to. climate risk comes in 4 distinct forms, and your governance responsibility extends across all of them. First, we have the physical risks, the acute. And these are the events that makes the headlines. You all know about them. It's the floods, the cyclones, the heat waves. For PLN, every one of these directly affects your assets. It could be a flooded substation, a transmission tower brought down by a landslide, a power plant forced to reduce output during a heat wave. And Indonesia's almost 7,000 disasters in 2 years remind us that this is not theoretical anymore. Then we have the chronic physical risks. These are the slow changes that don't make the headlines, but may be more consequential over time. Rising temperatures reduce thermal plant efficiency, having a direct economic impact. Sea level rise makes coastal assets gradually uninsurable, and changing monsoon patterns, they affect hydro output over decades. And these chronic risks affect the entire 30 to 40-year lifespan of assets being financed, planned, and built today. So it's also now a question. Then we have the transition risk. And this gets interesting, because this is where the energy sector is most exposed. And it has increased the most during the last 10 years, with the Paris Agreement, as President Director eloquently explained, was a pivotal moment where the global climate transition started to accelerate. Solar is already cheaper than coal in Indonesia. I found numbers of 4.78 cents versus 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and this difference will increase. Carbon pricing will increase. International investors are starting to divest from coal. The concept to watch is called stranded assets. PLN's coal fleet with PPA contracts extending over decades faces the risk of being worth less than the debt used to build it. Although the future is unsure when it comes to transition, because the global transition of energy system is not orderly managed. It's a bit of a chaotic process, and we're still early. Then we have the liability risk. This is the fastest growing category globally now. Climate litigation cases have tripled since 2015. And for PLN, there is maybe a unique Indonesian dimension. The state losses legal framework means officials can be prosecuted for decisions that cause financial losses. And this creates a paradox, and I think it's worth reflecting on. The TCFD framework, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, requires boards to understand and govern all of these 4 categories, not just the ones that are most visible. Let me translate this to the electricity value chain. If we go to generation, this is your fleet. Over 45 gigawatts of coal, and this is exposed to water risk for cooling and fuel transport. Hydro assets, they face drought risk, of course. But if you look at the transition column, as I already pointed out, solar is already cheaper. Coal generation cost has risen about 50% since 2020, and every year of continued coal expansion increases the stranded asset risk. Let's move to transmission. PLN's 500 kilovolt backbone, it crosses river floodplains, coastal corridors, and mountain passes, and they are prone to landslides. The February 2026 floods in North Kalimantan damaged infrastructure across 10 sub-districts. And the new RUPTL, let's call it the Electricity Supply Business Plan, calls for 70,000 kilometers of green transmission, and this needs to be designed for climate resilience from day one. It's cheaper than to retrofit it later. Distribution, and this is where outages are most visible to PLN's customers. The Jakarta March 2025 floods disrupted distribution across the capital. And as Indonesia electrifies transport, PLN has already over 1,000 EV charging stations, and it's only the beginning. That means that the distribution grid needs fundamental transformation. Fuel supply. Coal transport depends on river barges and ports, and they are all climate exposed. And the coal domestic market obligation at $70 per ton creates an artificial subsidy, And if it were removed, coal's levelized cost would increase by a factor of 2, 3, 2.5. So the critical insight from this table is that no segment is really safe. Physical and transition risks interact. Draft reduces hydro, forcing more coal generation, which increases emissions, which worsens transition risk. So it's a feedback loop. They interact. It's not linear loops. I also want to spend some time reminding you on Indonesia's climate risk profile. And let me put numbers to what PLN's operating environment looks like here. Indonesia has 42 million people living below 10 meters above sea level. And these are your customers. 81,000 kilometers of coastline, the second longest in the world. And PLN's infrastructure runs along much of it. The 7,000 climate disasters in 2 years, roughly 9 per day, and 13 million people affected. That's customer-based disruption going on. And we can maybe see numbers like 4.4% of GDP at risk by 2050. That's hundreds of billions of dollars. Jakarta is especially prone to these effects, with 40% already below sea level, sinking up to 25 centimeters per year from groundwater depletion. And the government is relocating the capital, but PLN's critical infrastructure remains. And what is the 25-year plan for Jakarta? That is really a central piece of addressing climate risks. And then you have the archipelagic challenge. No other utility in the world operates across 70,000 islands, each with their separate problems. But I want to acknowledge something I found, and that is PLN's dieselization program. Replacing diesel with solar and batteries on small islands is really improving resilience. And this is an area where PLN is already leading. The dual monsoon trap. Climate change makes both seasons worse. More flooding in the wet season, more drought in the dry season. And consecutive dry days are projected to increase 41% by late century, affecting hydro and thermal assets. As a matter of fact, and maybe you don't see it from the outside as I do, but Indonesia is among the top 3 most climate and disaster exposed countries globally, according to World Risk Index from the UN. This is PLN's operating reality. Let me connect 3 things that are usually treated separately, but in fact are deeply intertwined. The physical climate risks, we've already been talking about them. What we can learn from, for example, Nordic grid operators, they have demonstrated that climate adaptation design reduces outage frequency by 30 to 40%. And they see this not as a cost, but an investment with measurable returns. The water dependencies. Hydro assets depends on healthy watersheds. And when forests above reservoirs are cleared, sedimentation increases, inflow declines, and generation capacity drops. So protecting the forest upside above a reservoir is probably the cheapest way to maintain generation capacity. And this is a good example of what we call nature-based solutions, as opposed to expensive technological solutions. Nature works for you, and it works quite cheap. This is smart infrastructure investment, though. It's not environmental charity. Which brings us to biodiversity. When mangroves are lost, coastal substations are more exposed to storm surge. And when coral reefs degrade, fisheries might collapse, communities near PLN assets lose their livelihoods. And this is eroding social license. From PLN's published TNFD reports in 2023 and 2024, I would say you're ahead of most Asian utilities. And this is commendable. The next step is integrating nature risk into your governance. And stronger water governance improves CDP ratings, and that strengthens community trust and builds investment resilience simultaneously. So there we have the positive feedback loops in working with climate risks. I would say it's one of the highest return governance investments a board can make. Now I want to shift perspective. We have looked at what PLN faces. Now I want to show you what leaders do with this kind of challenge. and demonstrate that others have walked this path and came out stronger. Europe is particularly interesting looking at transformation. Since 2010, carbon emissions from the power sector globally has shown a slight increase from 1.6 tons per capita to 1.8. At the same time, Europe has halved its emissions from 2.5 to 1.3. And the biggest change comes from reducing coal use down to 9% in 2025. Time, Europe has increased renewables from 22 to 71%. Under the RUPTL, PLN aims to add around 43 gigawatts of renewable. Along with the microphone here, maybe you could use this one. That's working. So under the RUPTL, PLN aims to add around 43 gigawatt of renewable power capacity. And that would be lifting renewables to roughly 35%. I'm not saying that you could or even should do it the same as the EU is doing it, but there are great learnings in this story, and I will share some of them. First, I'd like to address this, and this is something I'm going to address directly. In my preparations for today, I've studied the arguments that shape energy policy thinking in Indonesia. And these are powerful arguments held by capable people, and I want to engage with them honestly, not dismiss them, but offer maybe a different lens on them. And these arguments comes from a scientific paper interviewing leaders from PLN. The first one is renewables are expensive. And I understand this view. And it was more true 5 years ago than it is today. But the question still is not today's price. It is the total system cost over time. And coal's generation cost in Indonesia, as I said, has risen, and solar cost has fallen. And when you add the cost that coal currently externalizing, the health impacts, climate damage, subsidy requirements that now consume $11 billion annually, that changes this picture quite fundamentally. And to expose these externalities, that's exactly the aim of the international frameworks like TCFD being used by markets and financial institutions. A second argument is coal is stable and reliable. Historically, yes, but let's look maybe 20 years ahead. The future risk is not intermittency from renewables, because that can be sorted out with grids and digitalization. It is system vulnerability from climate change itself. The flooding that damages coal transport, heat that reduces thermal efficiency, drought that cuts output. And a distributed system, solar on every island, batteries for storage, smart grid for flexibility, it's not just cleaner, it's also more resilient. And battery storage is where we have the most dramatic price development at the moment. And I will share just fresh numbers out of the press that the cost for stationary battery storage dropped 45%. And that was during last year. 45% during 2025. I'm quite sure that this will unlock the next stage of global solar growth. And it's a great opportunity for you to capitalize on. Climate can wait, growth first. This argument I respect deeply. But energy transition might not be a cost on growth. It might also be the growth strategy. Indonesia has the world's largest nickel reserves for batteries, unmatched geothermal potential, equatorial solar among the best on earth. So the industries of the 2030s will be built on clean energy, digital grids, and battery technology. The question is not whether Indonesia can afford to transition. I think it's whether it can afford not to. The current system works. Yes, it does. And you've done a great job. And it works for today's challenges. But the system is optimized for that. So the question is, how do you make that transformation to make it capable of tomorrow's challenges? The last one actually is an argument I can fully support. It's too complex to change. Yeah, complexity is real. It's in the energy markets. It's in a big company. but it might not be a good excuse for change. Transformation requires clear ownership across the institution. Someone must own the transition, not as a project, but as a standing responsibility. So I think this all sums up to that the biggest barrier that you might face as an energy utility in a transformation is not technology, it's not capital, it is that the system a utility company is working in is designed to preserve the status quo. And let me start by telling you about a tool that many utilities companies in the world are using right now. And we can format this as a thought exercise. I'm not predicting that exactly this will happen, but I'm asking if they did, how prepared would PLN be? And using this kind of what-if questions as a basis for scenario planning. It's a great tool as a way to handle all the geopolitical uncertainty and policy volatility that has increased in almost all markets. By using scenario planning, you can identify where you are sensitive for disruption and have a need to increase your resilience. So, for example, what if JET-P financing does not materialize at scale? Only 3 billion out of 22 is approved. There might be a need for a plan B, which might be funded transition pathways. How would that look like? And what if the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the CBAM, makes Indonesian industrial exports uncompetitive? From 2026, the carbon border tax affects nickel, steel, cement, all powered by coal electricity. So industrial customers will have a growing demand for green power. And PLN's readiness determines whether Indonesia can capture or lose this kind of market opportunities. And this one is interesting, I think. What if multinational data centers that is booming all around the world choose Vietnam over Indonesia? Let's hope not, right? Indonesia's data center capacity is expected to more than double, from 1.5 to 3.6 gigawatts energy demand by 2030. And multinational tech companies, they require renewable power procurement. And if PLN cannot support and supply it, the investment might go somewhere else. These kind of rhetorical questions cost very little to ask yourself. But the insight it generates can save billions. So I would recommend that you, as leaders of PLN, dedicate at least one session a year to stress test your strategy against scenarios like these. It's a great tool. And now, let me share 2 examples from European best practice that I think can mean something good for PLN. And that is how industry coalitions with partners can accelerate the green transition. Let's start with an example from Sweden. In Sweden, the government proposed an initiative called Fossil-Free Sweden. It's an initiative Sweco and I have been involved in. And the trick was that 22 industries in Sweden created voluntary roadmaps for fossil-free competitiveness. And the key insight from this is revolutionary. Business is not primarily worried about transition going too fast, but rather going too slow. So when companies see fossil-free as a competitive advantage, they become accelerators. And in Sweden, these 22 industries covering most of the private sector know now how to decarbonize in the roadmaps. And they also send back important consideration to the Swedish government, what policy should look like in order to support and enable a successful outcome. And the most dramatic example, I would say, is hybrid. This is a joint venture between LKAB, iron ore mining company, SSAB, steelmaker, and Vattenfall, Sweden's state-owned utility company. It's now producing fossil-free steel, and it will be done commercially in a couple of years, thereby reducing Sweden's total emissions by about 8%. And the best example of that this already works and exists, I have a watch here that is produced, the world's first consumer product produced by fossil-free steel. So it's working. And just doing these pilots and be able to scale them up is maybe one of the most important lessons in doing a successful green transition. Another good example is the First Movers Coalition. The First Movers Coalition was formed by companies to create early demand for near zero emission products like steel and cement, the hard to abate. It was launched by the World Economic Forum at the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow 5 years ago, and they created $16 billion in aggregated demand for emerging clean technologies. And Vattenfall, the Swedish utility company, they committed to buying near zero cement before it was commercially available. And that demand signal gave investors confidence to do it, and innovators the confidence to invest into those solutions. And looking at PLN, you will procure enormous quantities of steel and cement the coming years. And using that purchasing power to demand near zero materials would be transformative. And of course, it will reduce your and Indonesia's carbon footprint. The question at the bottom of this slide is not rhetorical. Could PLN use its massive purchasing power to create an Indonesian clean energy coalition and lead the region? Because energy is in markets all over the world moving to be a strategic issue for all players. For many sectors and business sectors, it used to be a cost, a bill that you got in the end of the month. Now it's a strategic question. Use that insight and power to lead the transformation. So now it's time to connect all these things I've shared to discuss the governance response that might come out of this. As I said, the compounding risks is a particular challenge when you are going on a green transformation journey. So it's how they interact, and I would point to the cascading effects that is seen in UK, for example, as a real threat for the coming years. And for example, that means it starts with rainfall. Extreme rainfall leads to flooding. Flooding damages transmission. Transmission is damaged, then it creates grid instability. Grid instability affects communities, and communities that experience repeated outages, they lose trust, they resist tariff increases, and may even, in a worst case that we see in some parts of the world, start to engage in electricity theft. So this cascade feeds back on itself. If we add biodiversity, it gets worse. So what resilient infrastructure governance requires is critical asset prioritization. Which assets of PLN create the greatest system impact if damaged? Which require redundancy planning? Can the system continue to work when key nodes fail? And this calls for cross-functional coordination under stress. As the President Director said, you need to cooperate. You need to cooperate internally, you need to cooperate with partners. And this also points to nature-based solutions, which is a cheap and smart way to protect your infrastructure. A question I often ask boards I work with is, when we identify a risk and choose not to act, who bears that risk instead? Is it communities near our assets? Or is it future management of the company? Is it the state? And that question has no single right answer. And as an advisor, you should be careful of giving advice. It's much better to give the right questions. And this question deserves to be asked. And it often has the effect that it impacts and improves decisions regarding planning for the future. Now let me show you what is possible. And let me share a story I think is particularly relevant for PLN. And I won't go to Sweden for this first lesson, because we have had the renewable energy backbone with our hydropower system for many, many years. So that story is not as relevant for PLN as the one I see from going slightly south to Denmark. This is a story of a state-owned company that was in a very similar position to PLN's, and what happened when its leadership decided to act. In 2008, Dong Energy, Dong Energy means Danish oil and natural gas. It was one of Europe's most coal-intensive companies. It had 85% coal, fossil, and 15% renewable. And they were responsible for a third of Denmark's total CO2 emissions. The company was heavily indebted, but their engineers were really proud of building what they considered the world's most efficient coal-fired power plants. They were really good at what they were doing. In 2009, the CEO announced the 85-15 vision, flipped the ratio within one generation, 30 years. And many inside the company thought he was wrong. How could we go from 15 renewable to 85 and reduce from 85 to 15 on fossil? And senior engineers in the company who had spent careers perfecting the coal technology, they felt threatened. And there was real internal resistance going on at Dong. But the leadership team, as Jor has done, had looked at the evidence and reached a conclusion. Their legacy business did not have a long-term future, and delaying that transition would not protect them. It would destroy shareholder value. So then we need to see how did they do it, because they did. They flipped the ratio, and even faster than in one generation. Well, they did 5 things. First, it was CEO-driven, and this was not delegated to a sustainability department. The utilities companies I see from around the world that fail often put this in the hands of a sustainability department. And that is not good enough. They don't have that platform, they don't have that mandate. And that's also the thing with such a thing as Sustainability Day. We need a Sustainability Day at companies, but we also need to make every day a Sustainability Day. So the CEO know this, he drove it personally, and every board meeting, every capital allocation decision was evaluated against the transformation strategy. And second, they started small. In 2006, only 2% of Dong's employees worked in wind energy. And that small unit was given the mandate to grow, but only if it could prove the business model. And once they proved the business model, the rest of the company followed. And third, they divested. They divested the old, they sold their oil and gas business, they sold customer distribution, they cut off everything that was not core to the future. And fourth, really important, they could drive down cost. So this was 15 years ago, and at that time, one bulk order of 500 offshore wind turbines, that was more than existed globally. But when Dong placed an order for that, they created the economies of scale that could cut offshore wind cost by 60% in 5 years. And fifth, they rebranded. In 2017, Dong became Ørsted. Ørsted was a new identity, a new purpose. The name was taken from a famous Danish scientist and inventor, Hans Christian Ørsted, most famous for having discovered electromagnetism. And electromagnetism, as you know, is an important scientific basis for electricity production. And they wanted with this rebranding to signal curiosity, innovation, and respect for nature, and understanding of nature. And let's have a look at Ørsted today. 99% renewables. Operating profit doubled. Market value is up 64%. It's ranked the world's most sustainable energy company. And crucially, still state-owned. Still state-owned. The Danish government owns 50.1%. So they have control of the company. It's a good story. And it's not a privatization story. It's a story about a state-owned utility that decided to lead, and it was rewarded for it. So the question I want to leave you with, what would PLN's version of this story look like? What would you do in order to make it your? Look at this table where I try to compare your companies, both state-owned. Fossil share, Dong had 85%, PLN is roughly 70%, so your starting position is actually better than theirs. Renewable share, nearly identical, 15 versus 16%. But Indonesia has, as we have elaborated, vastly more renewable potential than Denmark ever had. Self-image, and this is Maybe the most important row here. Dong's engineers believe they built the world's best coal plants. And PLN's leaders, with justification, are proud of electrifying almost 100% of the archipelago. Both are genuine achievements. But the leadership insight from Ørsted is this: honoring your past does not mean repeating it. You can be proud of what you built and committed to building something different. That's the learning. Financial stress. Well, there are similarities. But a key insight from Ørsted is Ørsted's financial recovery came because of the transition, not despite it. So the transition was the solution to the financial problem. And PLN spending $11 billion annually in subsidies for a coal-dominated system, what if we could redirect even a fraction of that towards renewables, which is already cheaper by kilowatt hour? Could that improve the situation? And then we have the renewable potential. Ørsted bet heavily on one technology, and that was offshore wind. PLN has access to arguably the most diverse renewable resource base in the world. You have solar, geothermal, hydro, wind. Almost everyone envy your situation. Your hand of cards is stronger than theirs ever was. So Ørsted's transformation took 10 years. They are obviously a smaller company, but PLN's starting position is at least as strong. And the question is not capability here, it's about doing it. So what's not the same between those companies? Well, PLN is not Dong, Indonesia is definitely not Denmark. Denmark is a small country, don't even go there, go to Sweden, it's much more nice with the nature. PLN does not operate with the same degree of freedom as companies as Ørsted. You're a part of a broader political, economic, and resource system. And I think Indonesia has 3 very real challenges to transform in the same way. Political priorities around affordability, a governance system where decisions are distributed, and a strong domestic coal economy. So for PLN, it's not about how to replace coal quickly. It is how do we evolve the system without breaking it. In your context, transformation will not be about disruption. It is about a managed transition. A managed transition. You cannot and you don't need to shut down coal tomorrow, but you need to build the future system in parallel. And this is what we strategists call as the clinging monkey strategy. You grab the next tree branch while still holding on to the branch you come from. The clinging monkey strategy. That means that you can use the cash flow and capabilities and stability of the existing fossil-based system to build the renewable, digital, and resilient energy system you need. And only gradually releasing the old business as the new one becomes strong enough. So you start to shift the energy mix. New investment decisions should move the system in a new direction. Make coal less dominant, not disappearing overnight. So where do we see the largest challenge in doing this? It's not resistance, it's that different parts of the systems are optimized for different outcomes. And the trick for a management team here is to focus on what can we do. And I see 2 critical areas here, investments and when it comes to transformation, a very tricky but important agenda. How do you implement and scale up pilot projects? You may not control the entire system. It's impossible when we talk about energy. And a coal-based economy means you cannot exit fast. So, and also as with large organizations, you have to live with governance complexity, which means that decision-making is distributed and complex. It is the same in my company. But as leaders, you have control over how your part of the system evolves. And considering the size and importance of PLN's business for the future of Indonesia, you can, with your knowledge, influence external parts of the energy system. By clever partnerships with the private sector, you can stimulate new demand to create a market and a willingness to pay for renewables. Change often happens when there is a shift in business interest. Capital will be rerouted and external pressure increases. So I think the transition will not be driven by ideology. It will be driven by economics and business opportunities. So to learn from Ørsted's story, you should be inspired by it and then find PLN's own transition pathway. A transition that will have to be gradual, system-aware, and investment-driven. So now let's move on to this. And this is where HR get involved. This is where it becomes important to lead a transformation of this magnitude. And let me share what evidence tells us here. The single most important insight from transformation research is this: culture change requires a movement, not a mandate. You can mandate compliance, you cannot mandate conviction. And transformation without conviction does not scale. Researchers at Stanford has documented a consistent pattern in successful transformations, and it looks like this. First, you need to frame the why around the purpose, not compliance. Ørsted did not say, we must reduce emissions because regulators demand it. Or that was true, that they demanded it, but it did not drive the transformation. Instead, they said, we are becoming a green energy company because that is where the future is. And the next example gives insights about timing. At the Indian pharmaceutical company, Dr. Reddy's, the CEO framed transformation around 4 words. For them, it was, good health can't wait. And then they began quietly making decisions based on that purpose before announcing it publicly. And when the purpose was finally shared, employees had seen it in action. They know that it was for real. So secondly, you need to demonstrate your quick wins, the de-dieselization agenda, for example, and stay low on declaring the ambitions, because that is where most large organizations fail. They announce a grand strategy and then spend years planning it, and successful transformers tend to look and do it the opposite way. They start by doing, they show results, and let the results build the momentum. Remember Ørsted's wind division, they were 2% of staff. They first had to prove themselves, and then they scaled what worked. The third is really important, that you should, especially in energy, harness your networks. Don't purely rely on hierarchy here. It cannot be driven only from top management. It needs champions at every level. You need the regional managers, you need the plant directors, you need field engineers who see the logic and can carry it forward. A cheap way to find innovation in a large company is to spread and share best practice. With so many employees, you already have the ones that are in the future, that do the things that you see you need for the transformation. Identify them, spread the best practice, reward the best practice. Let's move on here, and I think this is what winners do differently. As you might have experienced yourself, some of the best learning opportunities comes from failures, not from success. I live by the motto, you never lose, you just learn. And let me put this in an energy company transformation perspective by comparing utilities that have succeeded with those that struggled. Look at this table here. It's 6 factors. In each one, there is a clear pattern. Strategy. We have the utility companies Ørsted, Iberdrola, and Enel in Europe. They had a brutally clear strategic direction. They choose a future and they committed to it. BP and Shell, they had ambitious announcements, but they changed direction under pressure, not from strategy or learning. So the lesson here is consistency matters more than ambition. You need to endure in a transformation. And then we go to culture. The successful utility companies in Europe that had made a transition, they actively reshaped their culture to match the new direction. They changed incentives, retrained leaders. Your corporate university is a best practice on how to do this. Use that mechanism. And they rewarded collaboration across silos. BP and Shell, they tried to graft green ambitions onto an oil and gas culture, and that culture won. And then we have capabilities. Iberdrola, they built its transition on what it was already best at, grid infrastructure. Enel, they used digitalization as a transformation engine, not just being an IT project. BP, they lacked capabilities in the electricity market, and they tried to move too fast. Which brings the lesson for PLN here, build on your strengths. You're a grid operator, you're an infrastructure builder, and a systems operator. That's your foundation to build the transition on. And then we go to scaling. The successful companies, they scaled industrially from day one. And this is important. Every pilot project, they had a standard for scaling, they had an owner in the line organization, and a budget for scaling. This is where we often fail. We do a pilot, but without putting into the money to then scale it. The management literature calls this the pilot trap, and it's one of your specific risks, I would say. And this is the most important insight I can offer. PLN is structurally more like Iberdrola and Enel than BP. So you are an electricity company, you're an infrastructure owner, and a system operator. And for that, you have a better basis for transformation than BP ever had. But you might risk making BP's mistakes if you run many pilots without scaling, if you don't change culture, and if strategy shifts with political cycles. So the challenge is not to design the future. Everyone can do that. It is to make the organization capable of delivering it at scale. So let me distill now, in the end, what I see are the most successful boards do into 5 practices, and acknowledge where PLN already has started good. 1, climate and nature are standing board items, not annual reports, and it's reviewed regularly with live KPIs. And PLN's ESG cash war room is a strong foundation for this. The question is climate risk a standing item at every management meeting? 2, scenario analysis informs capital allocation. Does the RUPTL include climate scenarios? And what if, for example, 3 consecutive drought years reduces hydro output by 40%? What's the plan? And 3, risk appetite is explicitly defined for climate. Most boards have defined financial risk appetite, but very few have still to define climate risk appetite. And this is an opportunity for PLN to lead in this region. And then 4, of course, we talked about it, purchasing power drives value chain decarbonization. Like Vattenfall did with the First Movers Coalition, PLN will procure enormous quantities of materials, and that power can unlock and drive systemic change. And 5, disclosure. It reflects governance quality, and PLN's reporting is, in my opinion, already ahead of most Asian utilities. The Sustainalytics improvement is achievable through governance improvements, the same changes we have discussed today. And everything we have discussed, the reframing, the risk assessment, the transformation evidence, it feeds directly into stronger disclosure performance, which will give you a better position for capital access. I think this is a good way to end this, and let me close with what I believe matters most, and that is asking yourself the right questions, giving the future risks and opportunities in climate and energy markets, and what you can do to enable your version of a green transition. These are my suggestions on 7 strategic questions and 5 enablers that you need to go with that. And this comes from my analysis and understanding, and from academic research, and from the experience of utilities around the world. And as a good advisor, I pride myself to be representing Sweco and also Sweden with extensive experience from these solutions for sustainable development. I tend to believe that the best answers does not come from the outside, simply because there are no one in the whole world that knows PLN better than PLN itself. But, however, under these rapid changing external conditions, a good advisor is one that can put the right questions on the table. So look at these 7 concrete questions that I believe deserve your attention in order to stress test your resilience, your readiness, and maximize your chances of a successful and profitable green transition. Some of them you probably can tick off, Others might spark discussions that will lead to decisions increasing your resilience. I will just briefly comment on them for you to prioritize and discuss further. The first is about data as a foundation. Without being data-driven, you will struggle to asset-level climate data and simply be prone to guesswork. So if I ask today, which 50 PLN assets are most exposed to flood risk? Could you produce that risk? Do we need to make the analysis work first? Do we have the data for it? And compounding events. Do we have a war game scenario where 3 major events hit simultaneously? What would you do? Use the scenario planning. And to check whether you are ready for CDP water, a question would be, do we know for each PLN thermal plant how many days of water reserves we have during drought? Do we know which hydro reservoirs have the fastest declining catchment health? And question 4, this is a check towards biodiversity and the TNFD focus. When we plan new infrastructure, do we assess the ecosystem services we depend on or only the land we use? And moving on to disclosure. And it's not about writing better reports. It's about having better governance that the reports can evidence. So if a CDP assessor visited PLN tomorrow, would they find climate governance in the meetings, in the minutes from the meetings? And then about stimulating the demand. Are we using that purchasing power to drive change? And the final stress test, question 7, probably most important. What would PLN's version of the Ørsted story look like? What would it take to write it? I guess some of these questions might appear on your next strategy days or your next management discussions. As decision makers at PLN, you're not irrational. You're rational actors in a system that currently rewards short-term stability and political acceptability. Your decisions maximize those things, and they do it well. PLN's electrification rate, its operational reliability, its service to 90 million customers, they are all evidence of this rational, competent decision-making. But as we discussed, the system you operate in is optimized for today's success. And today's success does not guarantee tomorrow's. So your real challenge is not technology. Indonesia has the resources, and the global technological development and price reductions on renewables, storage, gives you a good hand of cards. The challenge is even not capital. Although some turbulence, green finance is and will be available. Your real challenge is this: changing the incentives and decision systems that keeps the current path locked in. You would want to identify and install powerful enablers that help you implement the transition. Try to change the rules of the game. Carbon pricing at meaningful levels, redirect subsidies, and that ratio today between 94% of government energy support going to fossil fuel, less than 1 to renewables, is a choice. It can be changed by you working with your ecosystem partners to create demand for green choices. 2, you can redirect capital from short-term to long-term. 3, leverage private sector momentum. And because academic research on PLN shows that independent power producers are the strongest supporters of renewable energy policy. And you should create space for partnerships. Build new capabilities at scale. Renewable storage, digital grids, not as pilots, but as core business. Every initiative should have a standard, a line owner, and a scaling plan. This is what separated Ørsted from BP. And 5, create accountability pressure inside your system. Change what is measured. If PLN's key performance indicator remains lowest cost of generation, there is no incentive to integrate renewables that might have higher upfront cost, but lower life cycle cost. So new metrics produces new outcomes. And the question is not whether to transform, it is how to redesign the system to enable it. And I believe the people in this room, you have both the mandate and the capability to begin that redesign. PLN has electrified Indonesia. That was your last chapter, and it was extraordinary. Very few organizations in the world can say they have connected almost 90 million customers across 17,000 islands. Your next chapter is about making that achievement endure. Against climate disruption, against shifting markets, against changing expectations from stakeholders to PLN. So your next chapter requires the same courage, the same persistence, and the same leadership as the first one did. Ørsted proved that a state-owned energy company can transform and come out stronger. Fossil-free Sweden showed that industry can lead when it sees competitiveness, not cost. The evidence of transformation is clear. It requires a movement, not a mandate. And it starts with addressing questions and creating enablers like the ones I proposed on the previous slides. And PLN has better resources, greater scale, and stronger momentum than any of the utility companies that I have showed today. So the system you operate in is designed for today, but you have the power to redesign it for tomorrow, a sustainable tomorrow. I wish you all the best on that journey. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andreas Gyllenhammar, for the precious insights, and we kindly ask you to remain on the stage.
Bapak Ibu, selanjutnya adalah penyerahan sertifikat BOD Sustainability Learning dari Sweke Group kepada PT PLN Persero. Untuk itu kami mohon kepada yang terhormat Direktur Legal dan Manajemen Human Capital PT PLN Persero, Bapak Yusuf Didi Setiarto untuk dapat naik ke atas panggung dan menerima sertifikat pembelajaran tersebut.
Give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Pak Didi, and also thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Andreas Gyllenhammar. I invite you to return to your seat.
Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, selanjutnya kita akan simak bersama langkah nyata PLN dalam menerangi Pulau Buntar di Kepulauan Bangka Belitung dengan teknologi BESS, Battery Energy Storage System.
Ya, betul sekali, di mana kini masyarakat dapat menikmati layanan listrik 24 jam penuh yang membuka lebih banyak peluang aktivitas dan peningkatan kesejahteraan. Tentunya hal ini juga memberikan manfaat besar bagi perempuan, terutama dalam mendukung produktivitas, keamanan, serta akses yang lebih luas terhadap pendidikan dan kegiatan ekonomi. Selamat menyaksikan.
Hari ini saya bersama tim PLN UW Bubble akan melanjutkan misi penyelaan 24 jam dan kali ini tujuan kami adalah ke Pulau Buntar. PLN Bangka Belitung memiliki 15 sistem isolated keluar yang hingga pertengahan 2025 ini masih 8 sistem yang menyala 24 jam. Melalui langkah ini, Pulau Buntar akan menjadi salah satu tambahan sistem isolated yang akan kita nyalakan dari 12 jam menjadi 24 jam. Pulau Buntar akan kita listriki 24 jam dengan tambahan baterai energy storage system, teman-teman. Jadi akan kita lakukan load shifting, beban puncak nanti akan dioperasikan tidak hanya dengan PLTD tapi kita prioritaskan dengan menggunakan BESS. Tetap jaga safety.
Kali ini ada PLN masuk, alhamdulillah. Siang dan malam ya ibu-ibu lah. Senang juga.
Semenjak ada listrik ini biasanya kita pakai laptop nih cara ngajarnya. Kalau dengan melihat layar langsung, ada video, pembelajaran itu lebih semangat lah.
Alhamdulillah bersyukur, para warga berterima kasih semenjak adanya PLN.
Penyalaan listrik 24 jam di Pulau Buntar bukan hanya tentang nambah jam nyala, tetapi tentang membuka peluang baru bagi masyarakat. Kami berharap dengan hadirnya listrik yang menyala penuh, aktivitas ekonomi, pendidikan, dan sosial di pulau ini bisa tumbuh lebih besar.
Ya, terima kasih PLN telah membantu kita. Amin.
Terima kasih PLN.
Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian untuk langkah nyata PT PLN Persero dalam menerangi negeri. Luar biasa sekali ya bahwa kita bisa melihat bersama salah satu Sri Kandi PLN.
Betul sekali.
Yang menjabat menjadi General Manager di salah satu unit induk wilayah PT PLN Persero.
Ya, salah satu leader perempuan yang tangguh di PLN ya. Ada sebagai General Manager PLN UIW Bubble.
Betul sekali, dan tentunya memiliki program yang juga mendukung sustainability di mana memberikan penerangan kepada pulau yang terpencil dan menggunakan teknologi sustainable yaitu BESS, Battery Energy Storage System. Luar biasa sekali.
Dan Bapak Ibu sekalian, karena ini kan 28 April masih ada kaitannya dengan Hari Kartini.
Yes, betul.
Dukung dengan Commemorating Earth Day dan Kartini Day juga.
Betul.
Ini kita pakaian hari ini kita sudah wow banget menggunakan dari Mandaliling Natal ya Bapak Ibu.
Betul sekali, jadi budget MC-nya digunakan untuk menyewa baju saja ya, betul ya. Terima kasih panitia. Dan tentunya hari ini juga kita mengundang Sri Kandi PLN, tepuk tangan dong yang sudah ada hadir di belakang kita. Boleh diberikan tepuk tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Yes, luar biasa sekali, teruslah berprestasi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Semoga harusnya hari ini pakai kebaya gak sih?
Iya.
Oh udah kemarin ya, jadi sewa terus udah dibalikin lagi. Oh iya baik kalau begitu.
Hari ini jadinya memakai wastra Nusantara.
Wastra Nusantara saja,
ya.
Baik. Jadinya kita deh yang pakai hiasan-hiasan kepala.
Ini tinggi mahkota ini setinggi harapan orang tua enggak sih?
Setinggi harapan orang tua kepada anaknya ya. Jangan kemana-mana Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, setelah ini kita akan mengikuti sesi diskusi panel yang tentunya telah menghadirkan pembicara-pembicara yang luar biasa yang akan membahas terkait dengan tema kita yaitu Empowering Climate Resilience. Ya nggak sih?
Betul sekali. Baik, hadirin yang kami hormati, tadi sudah disinggung oleh Mas Saurin. Kita kini akan memasuki sesi diskusi panel yang akan membahas tentang Empowering Climate Resilience.
Ya, dan sesi kali ini akan dipimpin oleh seorang moderator yang tentunya sangat luar biasa. Menempuh pendidikan di Institut Teknologi Bandung, beliau telah memiliki pengalaman lebih dari 1 dekade di dunia jurnalisme. Mengawali karir sebagai reporter dan news presenter di Net TV, beliau kini dipercaya sebagai senior news anchor sekaligus coordinator di CNBC Indonesia.
Dalam perannya, beliau tidak hanya memandu program berita, tetapi juga aktif melakukan wawancara eksklusif dengan para pengambil kebijakan, mulai dari menteri, regulator, hingga CEO perusahaan-perusahaan terkemuka, serta menyajikan analisis isu-isu strategis di bidang energi, ekonomi, bisnis, dan pasar keuangan kepada publik.
Baiklah Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, mari kita sambut moderator kita, Syarifah Rahma.
Selamat pagi, good morning ladies and gentlemen. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Perkenalkan saya Syarifah Rahma selaku ekonomik dan bisnis journalist / news anchor seperti yang tadi sudah disampaikan. Senang sekali berkesempatan untuk memandu sesi diskusi hari ini, acara yang sangat spesial tentunya. And I would like to ask permission to speak in bahasa as requested. And sebelumnya saya juga akan mengucapkan terima kasih, tentunya saya mengucapkan juga selamat bergabung dalam sesi diskusi. Sebelumnya juga selamat siang dan selamat datang kepada seluruh jajaran direksi dari PT PLN Persero, kepada para senior leaders, para narasumber, serta seluruh peserta yang hadir. Bapak Ibu hadirin semuanya, ladies and gentlemen, hari ini kita tidak hanya berbicara tentang sustainability sebagai sebuah komitmen, tapi tentang bagaimana sustainability ini menjadi cara kita berpikir dan mengambil keputusan. Karena realitanya adalah perubahan iklim bukan lagi isu masa depan, melainkan sebuah realitas operasional hari ini. Dan hari ini tentu kita akan membahas isu yang sangat penting karena kita ketahui bahwa gangguan ekstrim, tekanan terhadap kendala sistem, hingga tuntutan global terhadap ESG ini seluruhnya mengarah kepada satu hal Bapak Ibu, yaitu bahwa sistem ketenaga listrikan tidak hanya harus handal, tetapi juga harus adaptif dan tangguh terhadap perubahan. Dan dalam konteks ini, sustainability tidak bisa lagi diposisikan sebagai pelengkap, melainkan sebuah fondasi dari strategi bisnis. Dan langsung saja Bapak Ibu kita akan memulai sesi diskusi hari ini, dan saya akan mengundang para narasumber untuk dapat bergabung di atas panggung. Saya akan mengundang kepada, mohon maaf ini jatuh semua ya, sorry. Oke, kami akan mengundang dengan hormat untuk bergabung di atas panggung Bapak Evi Haryadi selaku Direktur Teknologi Engineering dan Keberlanjutan PT PLN Persero. Saya juga akan mengundang kepada Bapak Edwin Nugraha Putra selaku Direktur Transmisi dan Perencanaan Sistem PT PLN Persero. Berikutnya, we would like to welcome Bapak Andre Noto Hamiono selaku Direktur Deputi Pengurangan Resiko Bencana Kementerian Koordinator Bidang Pembangunan Manusia dan Kebudayaan PMK. We would like to welcome Ulzi Suren Jamsran as the representative and liaison to ASEAN UN Women. And last but not least, we would like to welcome Jan Martes, Country Director of France Development Agency, AFG. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time for this panel discussion and permission to speak in bahasa. And Bapak Ibu kita akan langsung saja memulai sesi diskusi kali ini. Sebelumnya saya sedikit reminiscing ya, beberapa tahun terakhir begitu ya, saya juga kerap mengikuti perjalanan PLN dalam langkah untuk memenuhi target-target sustainability. Dan saya beberapa kali juga sebetulnya memantau pergerakan PLN ya, utamanya di COP. COP 28 and 26 di Dubai dan di Baku, Azerbaijan. Saya bertemu dengan Pak Evi langsung begitu ya. Nah mungkin update juga Pak Evi ya, kita berbicara berkaitan dengan climate resilience dan hal ini juga sangat penting tentunya untuk diintegrasikan secara strategis dalam transisi energi PLN. Mungkin update Pak, sejauh ini apa yang sudah dilakukan oleh PLN berkaitan dengan climate resilience ini, apa yang dimaksud dengan climate resilience versi ataupun juga definisi dari PLN dan bagaimana mungkin langkah-langkahnya saat ini Pak Evi, silakan.
Terima kasih Mbak untuk introduction ya. Dan terkait dengan climate resilience khususnya apa yang dimaksud dengan climate resilience, mungkin sebelum saya memasuki ke sana, saya akan meninjau dulu bagaimana sebenarnya kondisi dunia saat ini. Kalau kita melihat bahwa di laporan World Energy Forum tahun 2025 itu terlihat jelas di sana bagaimana risiko iklim itu sudah menjadi khususnya yang terkait dengan cuaca ekstrim itu menjadi satu intermediate risk dalam jangka pendek. Bahkan kalau dilihat dari sisi jangka panjang itu sudah menjadi priority number one. Jadi cuaca ekstrim adalah hal yang perlu menjadi perhatian. Hal ini sudah terlihat bagaimana pada tahun 2022 itu di dunia telah terjadi adanya gelombang panas ekstrim yang mengakibatkan beberapa impact khususnya terhadap utility, di mana salah satunya adalah pembangkit-pembangkit PLTN di dunia itu mengalami dampak dari penurunan kapasitas yang kemudian berdampak pula di dalam operationnya. Di Indonesia sendiri, saya mencatat paling tidak ada beberapa kejadian yang sudah terjadi karena adanya perubahan dari cuaca ekstrim ini. Yang pertama tahun 2022 itu di Tambak Lorok, karena kebetulan saya dulu di operasi sistem, itu kami mencatat paling tidak terjadi kita mengalami biaya yang cukup tinggi untuk melakukan pemulihan terhadap kerusakan yang terjadi karena banjir. Itu mencapai 1,6 triliun untuk hal itu, dan kita kehilangan hampir 165 GWH. Kemudian ada juga yang terjadi di Bali beberapa waktu yang lalu, bagaimana banjir di Bali itu juga mengakibatkan dampak yang cukup ekstrim terhadap operasi kita di Bali. Dan yang terakhir, yang ini juga mengakibatkan kawan saya di samping saya nih, Pak Edwin, tidak tidur selama 21 hari untuk menormalkan Aceh pada saat itu karena adanya disaster di Sumatera Utara dan Aceh yang mengakibatkan sekitar 19 tower itu rubuh, terus ada 47 transfer dari transmisi itu terganggu. Nah, ini yang menjadi concern terhadap bagaimana kita perlu melihat hal itu. Jadi kalau di sisi definisi sendiri, saya mencatat di sini bahwa climate resilient itu adalah definisi secara tekstual ya, adalah ketahanan atau kemampuan suatu sistem kelistrikan untuk mengantisipasi, menyerap, beradaptasi dan juga pulih dengan cepat terhadap dampak perubahan iklim. Nah, PLN saat ini sudah melakukan beberapa pendekatan. Yang pertama tentunya adalah bagaimana kita memasukkan ini di dalam rencana kerja kita. Nah, seperti apa kita memasukkan ini dalam misalkan membuat laporan-laporan di dalam disclosure yang kita buat, yang salah satunya adalah terkait dengan IFRS 2. Kita sudah melakukan berbagai pencatatan apa-apa yang sudah kita lakukan, baik itu dari sisi governance, baik itu dari sisi perubahan cara kita merencanakan. Mungkin nanti Pak Edwin akan menjelaskan lebih lanjut apa saja yang akan kita lakukan perubahan untuk perencanaan sistemnya, dan dari sisi operasionalnya. Jadi kita sangat sadar bahwa climate resilient adalah satu yang sangat penting, dan ini sudah berdampak cukup besar yang kita rasakan selama beberapa tahun terakhir. Mungkin itu dulu ya dari saya.
Oke, baik Pak Evi. Saya ke Pak Edwin berikutnya ya. Pak Edwin tadi sempat disampaikan oleh Pak Evi tidak tidur 21 hari Bapak kemarin ya saat terjadi banjir bandang di Aceh begitu ya. Nah, tapi kita mungkin belum berbicara, nanti kita akan mengulas lebih dalam ya berkaitan dengan langkah-langkah tanggap bencana yang dilakukan begitu ya dari sisi transmisi. Tapi mungkin lebih ke mitigasi terlebih dahulu begitu Pak. Secara khusus Pak, mitigasi yang telah dilakukan untuk mengantisipasi dampak dari perubahan iklim seperti apa sih Pak? Karena perubahan iklim ini kan tentu membuat ada resiko di aset transmisi begitu. Nah, langkah utama yang sudah dilakukan seperti apa?
Ya, makasih Mbak. Seperti yang diinformasikan Pak Haryadi tadi, kita coba bercermin melihat apa yang terjadi di Aceh. Lalu kita coba memitigasi apa hal-hal yang harus kita lakukan dalam menghadapi misalnya terjadi bencana ke depan. Pertama, secara operasional sekarang kita sudah mengintegrasikan informasi mengenai ramalan cuaca, informasi dari windy.com, angin, kemudian El Nino, El Nina yang akan terjadi integrated terhadap sistem operasional kita. Jadi sekarang setiap GM di unit-unit transmisi setiap hari mendapat update mengenai kondisi tersebut, dan jika misalnya di satu tempat disebutkan akan terjadi sistem angin yang kencang atau hujan yang lebat, maka di tempat tersebut kita kondisikan dalam sistem siaga. Siaga ini dimaksudkan bahwa kita sudah bersiap untuk menghadapi kondisi terburuk apabila misalnya sistem transmisi yang menghubungkan satu titik ke titik lain itu rubuh misalnya seperti itu. Nah itu yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah ketika transmisi rubuh maka kita perlu memasang tower emergency sebagai penggantinya. Nah dulu kita tempatkan di tempat-tempat unit-unit kita berada. Nah yang terjadi di Aceh adalah ketika kita tempatkan dekat pun misalnya di Medan, lalu kita bawa itu ke Aceh, tapi karena bencana tersebut jalan tidak bisa terhubung, malah yang lebih cepat itu adalah membawa dari Jakarta, dari Halim dengan Hercules membawanya sampai ke bandara yang ada di Aceh. Dengan ini maka kami merubah strategi penempatan dari tower emergency yang dulu tersebar, sekarang lebih banyak terpusat di Jakarta. Sehingga nanti ini siap dibawa kemana-mana ketimbang kita bawa walaupun dekat tetapi tidak mungkin dilakukan.
Secara operasional itu masih oke begitu Pak?
Ya, ya. Jadi itu yang kita lakukan waktu di Aceh seperti itu. Kemudian kita membentuk tim emergensi. Jadi dalam menangani seperti di Aceh, kita tidak bisa mengandalkan di Aceh saja, tetapi dari seluruh tim emergensi kita yang ada di daerah Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Jawa itu ikut hadir ke sana untuk itu.
Okay.
Nah, tower emergensi dan tim emergensi dan peralatan emergensi yang tadi itu bergabung di sana membuat sebuah komando. Ya, komando ini juga perlu sekali karena ketika terjadi sebuah bencana tersebut biasanya masing-masing coba mencari atau melakukan kegiatan masing-masing ya untuk menyelamatkan daerah. Tetapi ada prioritisasi yang perlu diambil oleh command center. Nah, command center inilah yang penting untuk supaya seluruh kegiatan tersebut terarah dengan cepat tentunya. Nah, itu hal-hal yang kita ambil sebagai mitigasi terhadap kejadian-kejadian yang pernah terjadi terutama seperti di Aceh yang lalu, Mbak.
Oke, baik. Dan ini lesson learned juga begitu ya Pak ya, dari apa yang terjadi di Aceh akhirnya melihat seperti apa langkah-langkah yang bisa dilakukan untuk mitigasi ke depannya begitu ya. Terima kasih Pak Edwin. Nextnya saya ke Pak Andre ya. Pak Andre, kalau kita berbicara berkaitan dengan menghadapi resiko iklim yang kian nyata, ini kan perannya tidak bisa satu pihak saja, tidak bisa silo begitu ya Pak ya. Ini seluruhnya ya, baik dari pemerintah sebagai pemegang komando, kemudian juga state owned company seperti PLN begitu ya, seperti apa langkah-langkah yang bisa dilakukan untuk menjalankan ataupun juga memitigasi hal-hal yang ada kaitannya dengan pelaksanaan tugas dan tentunya juga dari masyarakat itu sendiri Pak. Nah, untuk masyarakat ini kan kita artinya perlu membangun budaya ketahanan agar kesiapsiagaan ini tidak sifatnya reaktif dan tidak panik Pak, tapi sudah tahu begitu ya ketika terjadi bencana amit-amit ya, tapi tentu ketika terjadi suatu hal bencana yang tidak diinginkan tentunya, nah tapi sudah ada langkah-langkah, sudah paham begitu harus bersikap seperti apa. Nah bagaimana mungkin ini dari Kemenko PMK sendiri begitu Pak bisa melihat dan juga membangun budaya kebiasaan kolektif yang mengakar untuk tanggap bencana.
Ya, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera Bapak Ibu semua. Jadi memang kita saat ini bukan saja sebagai negara dengan keanekaragaman hayati yang luar biasa, tapi juga kita sebenarnya adalah negara dengan resiko bencana yang tinggi. Dan itu bisa dilihat dari bagaimana risiko bencana, baik itu hidrometeorologi yang merupakan 95% dari bencana yang umumnya terjadi di Indonesia, maupun juga dengan bencana-bencana lain. Nah, tentunya kita perlu memperkuat bagaimana kesiapan dan ketahanan masyarakat. Tentunya dengan PLN adalah sumbu utama ya dalam masalah ketahanan energi dan ketahanan dan bagaimana mendorong ketahanan bencana ini kita perkuat. Kenapa ini menjadi masalah dalam masalah kendala saat ini kita menghadapi yang namanya perubahan iklim nyata terjadi di Indonesia. Bagaimana 2025 kemarin kita menghadapi rangkaian bencana yang sangat luar biasa. Yang pertama bagaimana adalah bencana hidrometeorologi yang ternyata adalah pada saat musim penghujan ternyata masuk ke musim kemarau, ternyata kemaraunya adalah kemarau basah. Nah kemarau basah ini antisipasinya ternyata berbeda sekali dan kita bisa melihat bagaimana masalah alih fungsi lahan dan lain-lain yang terjadi menyebabkan bencana banjir yang luar biasa. Kita bisa melihat Maret 2025 menimpa Jabodetabek, sementara di kemudian ternyata ada dampak banjir-banjir yang lain. Dan kemudian kita melihat bagaimana bencana Sumatera dengan segala hormat saudara-saudara kita di Provinsi Aceh, Sumatera Utara maupun Sumatera Barat, dan bagaimana PLN juga sudah sangat luar biasa turun langsung untuk bisa memulihkan keadaan, dan ini kita juga ikut terlibat di dalam pemulihan tersebut. Nah ini yang harus kita bangun adalah sebetulnya adalah masalah budaya tangguh bencana. Jadi budaya tangguh bencana ini yang masih menjadi salah satu kendala utama yang belum harus diperkuat terus menerus. Nah kenapa? Karena budaya tangguh bencana kita harus melihat bagaimana ternyata kita menghadapi tidak saja dengan risiko bencana, tapi terkait dengan bagaimana perubahan iklim itu sangat luar biasa dampaknya. Kita bisa melihat adanya, tadi saya sampaikan adalah kemarau basah. Jadi musim kemarau tapi diiringi dengan curah hujan yang tinggi juga, dan ini mana? Oh iya, siap. Jadi itu yang harus kita ini lebih lanjut untuk masalah itu, dan bagaimana kita membangun budaya tangguh bencana itu. Nah kita kebetulan kita membuat sebuah upaya yang dengan prinsip namanya kita tangguh. Kita tangguh itu adalah terbagi dari 3 prinsip. Yang pertama adalah masyarakat yang tangguh bencana, lalu kedua adalah kolaborasi dari seluruh pemangku kepentingan untuk tangguh bencana, dan kita mendorong dashboard kebencanaan. Nah dashboard kebencanaan ini ke depan bisa disinkronkan dan disinergikan dengan dashboard yang juga dikembangkan oleh seluruh pihak termasuk PT PLN. Nah karena kita melihat bagaimana masyarakat masih memiliki kesadaran yang rendah terkait dengan masalah bencana di wilayah, seluruh wilayah masing-masing. Jadi sehingga ini menjadi salah satu tantangan kita ke depan untuk bisa mendorong proses ini. Kami di awal tahun 2026 ini ada yang kita sudah lakukan dengan UN Women kebetulan terkait bagaimana kita mendorong prinsip terkait dengan tangguh bencana pada masyarakat. Ini di beberapa tempat, antara lain di Nusa Tenggara Timur, lalu di Nusa Tenggara Barat maupun di Provinsi Sulawesi Tengah. Nah ini yang kita dorong agar ada upaya kita untuk tangguh bencana juga kita lebihkan, masukkan ke dalam satu prinsip perempuan tangguh. Kenapa perempuan? Nah ini kebetulan bertepatan dengan ini ya, Hari Kartini. Bagaimana kita menyadari bagaimana sebetulnya peran perempuan dalam seluruh wilayah kebencanaan itu sebetulnya sangat diperlukan. Karena akhirnya yang menyelamatkan anak-anak, akhirnya yang menyelamatkan keluarga perempuan. Ketika yang lain justru sudah lari. Nah ini yang kita harus mendorong peran perempuan sebagai agen ini ya, kesiapsiagaan bencana. Nah kami dengan program yang ada, kita melatih dari latihan-latihan yang kita lakukan, kita berikan pelatihan, itu kemudian kita masukkan ke dalam sebuah dashboard.
I see.
Nah dashboard itu yang terintegrasi juga dengan Inaris. Dengan Inaris sehingga bisa dibaca oleh masyarakat, bisa dilihat. Nah yang kita dorong sekali untuk penguatannya ini adalah bagaimana di dalam platformnya tersebut ada yang namanya mitigator. Nah, jadi orang-orang yang dilatih sudah masuk, kita masukkan dalam mapping di dalam dashboard tersebut, sehingga kita bisa pada saat ada satu bencana di satu tempat, nanti kita bisa melihat siapa yang ada sebagai agen penyelamat atau agen perubahan terkait bencana di daerah-daerah tersebut. Nah, ini kita sudah, yang kita mulai kemarin di NTT, NTB maupun di Sulawesi Tengah.
Oke, animo ataupun juga antusiasmenya Pak di lapangan, begitu tadi di daerah-daerah yang disebutkan, seperti apa sih?
Iya, ternyata masyarakat ternyata antusias karena kita menghadapi tantangan nyata, kendala nyata misalnya terkait bencana, banyak tidak memiliki pemahaman terhadap bencana atau karena memori kolektifnya tidak ada lagi. Jadi misalnya di Cianjur sebetulnya siklus gempanya adalah siklus 20 tahun. Sementara ya 20 tahun itu sudah plus bisa minus. Seharusnya bisa dipahami terhadap resiko tersebut dengan membangun bangunan dengan kolom yang kuat, lalu bagaimana menghindari daerah-daerah yang rawan dan lain-lain. Sudah ada seluruhnya ini. Tapi pemahaman terhadap resiko bencana ini tidak menjadi budaya. Sementara kita harus mencontoh sebenarnya Jepang. Jepang kita lihat bagaimana berapa kali dalam 1 tahun ini tsunami ada di Jepang. Gempa dan tsunami ya, gempa dan tsunami. Sementara Indonesia sebetulnya sudah bisa kita lihat, Bapak Ibu semua bisa melihat sama-sama di Inatius yang dikeluarkan oleh BMKG bagaimana gempa terjadi setiap hari juga di Indonesia. Hanya saja karena kita negara kepulauan dengan wilayah laut yang luas, banyak gempa terjadi di daerah laut sehingga kita tidak tahu. Tapi apabila kita terlambat mengantisipasi, tidak memiliki budaya tangguh bencana yang kuat, kita tidak memahami bahwa daerah-daerah berisiko itu justru daerah-daerah misalnya memiliki pariwisata yang tinggi, yang ternyata ada banyak orang. Bahkan kita berdiri di atas ini jalur sesar yang terpanjang di Pulau Jawa, Bapak Ibu semuanya, yang namanya sesar Baribis. Sesar Baribis yang memanjang dari Purwakarta sampai ke Tangerang. Ini banyak yang tidak tahu. Nah, upaya kita harus kita lakukan karena dengan kondisi Jabodetabek misalnya terpadat di Indonesia, dengan jumlah penduduk terpadat di Indonesia, ini bisa memiliki resiko dan tentunya di sini kita tidak ingin adanya hal tersebut. Sehingga kita bagaimana penggunaan risiko bencana kita dorong menggunakan edukasi dan bagaimana kolaborasi dan ini yang kita terus perkuat.
Oke, dan tadi diperkuat dari ketahanan masyarakat itu sendiri, begitu ya, ketangguhan masyarakat dan tentunya pemahaman masyarakat dalam menghadapi kondisi tadi ya perubahan iklim dan juga ancaman bencana.
Betul.
Nah, next question, I'll proceed to you, Ulzi. So please allow me once again to address the question in bahasa. So the question is, mengapa pengaruh utamaan gender ini perlu dipandang bukan sebagai pelengkap, tetapi sebagai elemen strategis dalam membangun ketahanan iklim dan infrastruktur ketenagalistrikan yang lebih tangguh, seperti apa?
Good morning once again, and I would like to thank for this amazing opportunity to reflect together from our past experiences, what we've been doing together in the context of emerging and newly approaching unique situations ahead of us. I would like to answer to this question reflecting back to what our colleague from Swenka Group, Andreas, spoke about, and going back to what Andreas already mentioned, and it was already paved from the previous speakers, Bapak Evi and Bapak Edwin, on the context side. So when we look into the current issue of the resilience, we have heard from Andreas, it does directly depend on the system that it can actually help us to achieve the sustainability and resilience. But then the systems, I think, need to reminding ourselves, the systems that we have built so far, what we have, they are coming from the past. They are very good fit for purpose for the previous situations. Many of those situations we already managed to put into standard operating procedures. We know how to technically solve the problems. The situation that we are facing now is absolutely unique. And the complexity is on extreme rise. And everyone spoke about it. Everyone now realizes, a couple of years ago, or especially before COVID, it was very difficult to talk about complexity. Now, everyone agrees, yes, it is complex. And everyone agrees that just having excellent management tools would not bring us to where we need to be. And that's why it is amazing that PLN Board of Directors with all the key staff are here. And we have heard today how the leadership aspect can complement the management excellence that we already have in PLN. And when we spoke about the gender equality, the women's role, the leadership, the community's work, and how PLN is already leading, I was amazed to see your video, which you have played at the beginning of this particular event, where you are actually showcasing both very concrete technical engineering solution coupled with amazing adaptive approaches by engaging communities themselves. And to the issue of which Pak Andre spoke about, when we looked deeper into the system issue, it was very clear that we needed to start to ask other questions, and this goes back also to line of questions. I think there were 7 or 5 key questions that Andres has also asked. And I want to also pose one more additional question in order to respond to your question. Sorry for taking a bit longer time. And that is about, so who is actually leading the system? Is it those who are already in the management only? Is it only the experts who are there? Or as PLN is showcasing in practice, you're also bringing together leadership from the bottoms up, from the communities. And from the global practices, we have seen the best resilient communities who are able to respond, to prevent first and to respond to any shocks, that it managed to combine management and leadership from the top and from the bottom. And this is what we are so proud to see evidencing from PLN, and in this leadership that is coming from the top and from the communities. Those who connect the dot are always women, because of the nature of the leadership that women bring, because of the empathy, because of extreme close connectedness to all the family members, community members, the knowledge that is carried from generation to generation, also through women. And of course, I can speak a lot, but we are also amazed how Kemenko PMK managed to embrace this entirely into the whole policy process for the response of Sumatra and Aceh disasters. And we have seen it in action, how by bringing women's voice would challenge the usual way and actually bring solutions much faster and much more efficiently.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosie. Very interesting. And maybe we could ask ask the questions to the panelists for the answer. Who should lead this project? Yeah, who should lead? Who should take the lead on this thing on sustainability and how to manage all of this? Yeah, or maybe we can ask the consensus as well. But moving forward to the next one, Yan. So the questions I will once again ask in bahasa. So dari perspektif lembaga pembiayaan internasional, mengapa proyek infrastruktur energi saat ini tidak lagi cukup dinilai hanya dari sisi teknis dan ekonomi, tetapi juga ketahanan iklim, keberlanjutan dan inklusivitas sosial?
Thank you for your question. First, I would like to thank the PLN team and all the organizers for having this event, very important event today, and inviting us. That's very, very interesting. With a very inspiring speech by the president of PLN, also a very interesting intervention by a colleague from SWECO. Well, the financial institutions, public, private, the banking system, they look for good and sound projects. So that's the first thing. So it was said, capital is there, money may be found. Of course, it's not easy always, but it's manageable. But the point is, and more, looking for good projects. So the question is, what is a good project? And now the question is changing a little bit. So coming back more precisely to to your question. From a financing institution, international financing institution, but as a whole financing institution perspective, there are minimum requirements to engage. An institution like AFD, Agence Française de Développement, we look for basic eligibility, and the basic eligibility now means a project not solely based on its technical feasibility or economic return. Of course, it's important, but it cannot be enough. Projects must meet minimum environmental, social, and climate safeguards. This includes ensuring that environmental and biodiversity impacts are acceptable and properly managed, mitigated. Social impacts are addressed in line with international standards, and climate risks are identified and managed. So I use the word managed a lot of several times. Doesn't mean that the risks are disappearing, they are managed. That's a very important dimension. I was previously director of risk for AFD worldwide, so that's a dimension which is very important to take into account. We have to take into account the risk and manage them. So it's a way to move forward. So this approach is not an additional layer. It is a precondition for financing more and more. So if these aspects are not adequately addressed, the project simply cannot proceed through our appraisal process, but I may say that's a case for the international financier and more for any financier everywhere. Second point, more fundamental, is that technical and economic value cannot be separated from sustainability. Beyond the financing perspective, there is a more fundamental point. It's increasingly misleading to think that technical and economic merits can be assessed independently from climate resilience, sustainability, and social impacts. Energy infrastructure is built for the long term. So that's the approach we have also, of course. Often several decades of vision. And it's then highly exposed to climate risks. Ignoring these risks lead to incorrect economic valuation. For example, 2 questions. What is the long-term value of a hydropower plant if rainfall patterns significantly change in 20 or 30 years? Or, what is the value of a transmission line if its capacity is reduced due to extreme temperature? That's not so hypothetical. So similarly, environmental and social impacts have real economic costs. Air pollution translates into significant public health costs. Carbon emissions increasingly translate into financial risks through carbon pricing, regulatory constraints, and the growing cost of climate-related damages. And poorly managed social impacts can lead to delays, opposition, and increased project costs. So even from a purely economic standpoint, integrating these dimensions is not a constraint. It is a way to better capture the true value and risk of a project. This is why these considerations must be embedded throughout the entire project life cycle, from planning and design to construction and operation. So what do we do concretely? From project level requirement to systemic support. So we try to translate this principle into concrete action at both project level and corporate level. So at the project level, for example, for the Banten Wind Farm and Masang Hydro project, which are under instruction with PLN at the moment. So we require the integration of climate change consideration from the earliest stages of design. We finance key studies such as environmental and social impact assessment and resettlement action plans to ensure impacts are minimized and properly managed. And we also support gender action plans, both at project level and within utilities. And at the corporate level, we have finance training programs to build capacity, internal capacity on climate resilience across the organization of PLN. And we will support as well PLN in developing its climate adaptation strategy. And beyond that, we increasingly focus on just transition and social acceptability. So we are supporting work on stakeholder engagement and citizen participation in order to improve how projects are designed and implemented in consultation with local communities. Again, this is critical to reduce opposition, avoid delays, and ensure long-term project success, something we have clearly seen in many countries. And finally, we are also exploring financial innovation, for instance, working on carbon credit mechanisms for renewable projects, with the objective of improving their economic viability and making them sustainable in the future and more than bankable. So this is precisely the role of climate finance to help to align economic performance with climate and to crowd in more investment into energy transition projects. So sorry to be a bit long, but that was a way to elaborate on this critical issue.
Okay, thank you, very appreciated Ian. Bapak Ibu, kita tinggal sedikit lagi waktunya, sekitar 17 menit. Kita akan buka tanya jawab ke floor. Oke, kita akan membuka sesi tanya jawab. Bapak Ibu, mungkin ada yang ingin bertanya langsung kepada para narasumber kita. Kalau tidak, nanti akan saya lanjutkan dengan pertanyaan dari moderator. Ada yang mungkin ingin bertanya terlebih dahulu? Masih belum ada. Oke, let's proceed ya. Saya kembali lagi ke Pak Evi ya. Pak Evi, kalau kita berbicara tadi kan artinya secara aspek ESG, aspek sustainability ini kan sudah mau tidak mau sudah dimasukkan ke dalam berbagai prinsip tata kelola dan juga operasional dari perusahaan begitu. Nah, seperti apa mungkin secara sistematis dalam sistem ketenagalistrikan PLN, perubahan mendasar apa yang diperlukan dalam tata kelola, standar teknis dan juga pengelolaan aset Pak Evi begitu ya sejauh ini, sejauh apa hal ini sudah dimasukkan oleh PLN dan mungkin tantangan utama Pak dalam mengharusutamakan climate resilience di seluruh organisasi dan bagaimana PLN ini bisa memastikan implementasinya konsisten Pak dari level pusat hingga ke unit operasional. Silakan Pak Evi.
Baik Mbak, jadi memang ketika kita tadi untuk melakukan perbaikan khususnya bagaimana kita menjawab climate resiliency di PLN, kami paling nggak melihat ada 4 aspek yang harus diperbaiki. Yang pertama adalah terkait dengan tata kelola. Nah, seperti yang tadi sudah disampaikan bahwa climate resilience ini banyak terimpact oleh adanya climate change. Kita sudah melakukan climate mitigation, tapi ternyata climate mitigation secara bersama seluruh dunia ini tidak cukup. Sehingga suhu masih tetap naik, disaster sudah mulai terjadi, sehingga climate adaptation ini sudah harus kita lakukan. Nah, di sisi PLN sendiri, kami mulai dari perbaikan yang pertama adalah tata kelola. Di tata kelola kita sudah punya misalkan roadmap untuk transisi energi. Nah, sekarang kita harus mulai memikirkan bagaimana juga roadmap transisi energi ini dilengkapi dengan roadmap ketahanan iklim. Bagaimana kita bisa mengadaptasi dari perubahan yang lebih ekstrim dari yang sebelumnya kita lakukan. Karena roadmap transisi energi dulu kita bikin untuk membuat climate mitigation. Nah, sekarang kita harus melakukan climate adaptation. Itu yang pertama. Di sisi manajemen risiko, kita juga sudah mulai melakukan bagaimana kita inline dengan sertifikasi ISO 31000 tahun 2018. Di mana itu adalah kerangka umum manajemen risiko untuk keberlanjutan bisnis. Yang terkait dengan bagaimana keberlanjutan bisnis ini sustainability-nya tergantung juga oleh climate mitigation dan adaptation kita. Di sisi lain kita juga saat ini telah menyusun climate resilient infrastructure guideline yang mengacu pada ISO 14091 tahun 2021 untuk bisa melakukan penilaian risiko iklim, kemudian kerentanannya dan bagaimana kita mengadaptasi pengambilan keputusan. Nah, bagaimana ini kita turunkan ke level unit adalah bagaimana kita saat ini memasukkan KPI dari maturity level terhadap kemampuan unit untuk melakukan sustainability jangka panjang dari dampak dari iklim tadi. Itu di sisi tata kelola. Kemudian di sisi yang kedua adalah sisi perencanaan dan engineering. Nah, bagaimana tadi Pak Edwin sudah menyampaikan, kita harus mulai melakukan perencanaan ini tidak hanya berdasarkan hal-hal yang sebelumnya kita lakukan. Kita dulu tidak bisa membaca adanya kejadian ekstrim yang terjadi sampai kejadian di Aceh kemarin. Bagaimana puluhan tower rubuh secara bersama. Saya menjadi direktur transmisi mulai dari manajer operasi sampai GM, dulu paling tower 5 rubuhnya kali kejadian. Nah, sekalinya Pak Edwin jadi direktur transmisi, dia mencapai 20-an sampai 30 tower rubuh yang secara bersama dikarenakan adanya disaster yang demikian besar. Sehingga RUPTL waktu itu kita buat misalnya di sisi perencanaan itu hanya mempertimbangkan apa-apa yang selama ini sudah kita lakukan. Nah, ke depan ini harus kita rubah. Mungkin saat ini kita membangun tower-tower transmisi yang backbone itu menggunakan 1 tower 2 sirkuit. Mungkin kita harus kembali ke zaman dulu pertama kali kita membangun tower di Jawa Bali misalkan. 1 tower itu hanya 1 sirkuit. Apalagi kalau itu memasuki daerah-daerah yang mungkin rawan longsor dan sebagainya, sehingga ketika 1 tower itu rubuh, 1 towernya masih bisa mengalirkan listriknya, sehingga tidak mengalami disaster seperti yang terjadi di Aceh. Hal-hal lain misalkan flood yang sudah mungkin sebelumnya kita hanya mempertimbangkan banjir sampai level tertentu, mungkin harus kita naikkan. Di sisi ketahanan terhadap cuaca juga mungkin sama. Kita harus meningkatkan level peralatan kita untuk tahan terhadap cuaca yang lebih tinggi dari yang ada. Itu dari sisi perencanaan dan engineering. Jadi kegiatan perencanaan dan engineering ini mungkin juga harus diperbaiki. Kemudian yang ketiga adalah sisi operasional. Nah, sisi operasional karena tadi yang 2 ini kalau kita lihat adalah dari sisi strategi. Yang ketiga adalah sisi operasional dari sisi tactical. Tadi Pak Edwin sudah menyampaikan contoh bagaimana strategi kita yang selama ini kita anggap itu berhasil, di mana kita menempatkan cadangan tower untuk perbaikan itu dekat dengan lokasi, ternyata malah tidak berjalan. Tactical kita nggak berjalan karena jalan lumpuh gitu. Tidak bisa diangkut oleh kendaraan darat. Yang bisa mengangkut adalah kendaraan udara. Sedangkan kendaraan udara tidak ada di tempat yang dekat, yang ada malah di tempat yang jauh. Nah, hal ini mungkin juga perlu nanti kita lakukan review dari sisi tactical. Itu yang ketiga. Yang keempat adalah enabler. Bagaimana enabler ini harus memungkinkan kita bisa melakukan apa-apa yang sudah kita buat secara strategi maupun secara tactical tadi. Kami melihat digitalisasi menjadi hal yang sangat penting. Di samping itu adalah kemampuan SDM kita. Ya. Nah, di sisi digitalisasi saat ini kita sudah punya yang namanya climate click, yang mungkin nanti kita bisa expand bagaimana ini bisa juga dimasukkan informasi-informasi lain yang bisa mendukung strategi dan taktikal yang tadi kami sampaikan.
Oke, baik,
mungkin
baik.
Itu yang
baik, ini menarik sekali Pak Evi ya, karena ini kaitannya tuh dengan begitu banyak aspek lainnya begitu ya, karena ini juga kaitannya mungkin kepada rencana investasi ke depannya begitu ya, seperti apa tentunya rencana-rencana lain yang juga ada kaitannya dengan jangka panjang ke depan begitu. Nah, mungkin Pak Edwin bisa membantu menjawab Pak dari sisi tadi ya, resiko iklim, kemudian juga ini juga kan merubah artinya tata kelola dari perusahaan dan juga sistem tadi seperti disampaikan oleh Pak Evi begitu, dan di satu sisi juga ini kaitannya juga kepada perencanaan sistem tenaga listrik kita agar rencana investasi dan juga perkuatan jaringan ini bisa menjadi lebih siap begitu. Ini ada kaitannya juga dengan investasi, mungkin ada perubahan begitu Pak. Nah, ini bagaimana mungkin perencanaan investasi, operasi sistem dan juga pengelolaan aset transmisi di PLN ini bisa semakin terhubung dan bisa sekaligus menjawab tadi apa yang disampaikan tantangan ke depan begitu ya, tadi yang disampaikan juga oleh Pak Evi, ini semuanya terangkum menjadi satu, seperti apa Pak Edwin?
Ya, baik Pak. Kalau tadi di bagian pertama kita lihat bagaimana sistem operasional coba mengantisipasi kalau terjadi bencana, maka sekarang coba kita membahas tentang bagaimana sistem perencanaan coba mengantisipasi jika terjadi bencana. Kalau kita lihat Banda Aceh, di Banda Aceh tersebut terkoneksi ke sistem Aceh dan ke sistem Sumatera itu melalui transmisi yang ada di sisi, saya sebut sisi timur lah. Jadi dari mulai Banda Aceh ke Arun ke Sumatera. Nah, kemudian di sisi baratnya dari mulai Banda Aceh ke Nagan masuk ke sistem Sumatera itu belum terbangun. Nah, ketika terjadi bencana, kemudian bencana ini menghancurkan transmisi sisi di timur, maka praktis Aceh akan terisolasi. Maka yang pertama tentunya pada sistem pulau-pulau yang atau kota-kota yang terdampak bencana, maka sistemnya harus kita masuk sistem loop. Jadi tidak hanya sistem barat yang kita bangun, tapi sisi timurnya juga. Ya, sehingga dua-duanya nanti kalau ada tergangguan di barat kita masuk ke timur, kalau ada timur kita masuk ke barat. Pertanyaan berikutnya adalah bagaimana kalau gangguannya justru dua-duanya di barat dan timur. Ya. Maka sistem pembangkitan yang kita buat itu haruslah sistem pembangkitan yang mampu berfungsi island. Walaupun sistem transmisinya barat hancur, timur hancur, tapi sistem-sistem pembangkit island ini mampu beroperasi dengan pulau-pulau kecil, dengan daerah-daerah kecil. Misalnya Banda Aceh dengan pembangkit dieselnya itu mampu dengan Banda Aceh dan sekitarnya. Arun dengan pembangkit gasnya itu mampu dengan Arun dan sekitarnya. Nagan PLTU-nya juga mampu dengan sekitarnya. Nanti jika transmisinya terjadi itu bisa kita atasi secara operasional tadi, kemudian kita koneksikan sistem-sistemnya. Yang berikutnya tentunya komunikasinya. Sekarang komunikasi kita itu berdasarkan fiber optik. Kita yakin dengan kejernihan, dengan teknologi yang tinggi. Tetapi ketika transmisinya hancur, kemudian fiber optiknya juga hancur, maka praktis komunikasi hilang. Nah, ini rasanya komunikasi berbasis radio yang pernah kita buat 20 tahun dulu, 25 tahun itu segera kita aktifkan, kemudian berbasiskan satelit. Terbukti kita di waktu disaster yang ada di Aceh, kita memakai satelit, komunikasi satelit. Dan mungkin ini dua komunikasi yang harus kita segera aktifkan untuk mengatasi kondisi-kondisi darurat. Mungkin gitu secara umum saya.
Oke, baik, terima kasih Pak Edwin. Saya next ke Pak Andre ya. Pak Andre, kalau kita berbicara tadi penguatan inisiatif komunitas tangguh, kemudian pemberdayaan perempuan, ini kan diharapkan ini dapat menghasilkan dampak sosial ekonomi yang nyata sekaligus mendukung keberlangsungan operasi kelistrikan, begitu ya Pak Andre. Nah, tapi di sisi lain kolaborasi yang paling efektif Pak antara PLN, masyarakat dan pemerintah daerah agar komunitas di sekitar infrastruktur ketenaga listrikan ini benar-benar menjadi bagian dari solusi ketahanan iklim seperti apa?
Jadi kita selalu memperkuat upaya saat ini untuk konsolidasi keseluruhan seluruh wilayah di Indonesia. Misalnya kemarin tahun lalu kan ada bencana juga yang di Bali tadi sudah disampaikan. Itu kami kemarin mengkoordinasikan terkait dengan penataan tata kelola dari Das Ayung. Das Ayung itu yang salah satu yang penyebab banjir yang luar biasa di Denpasar itu yang ya banyak sekali korban di sana ya dengan nah ini akan terus berulang kalau tidak ada tata kelola masalah tata ruang ya, tata ruang dan lain-lain. Nah ini yang kita konsolidasikan. Demikian pula Jakarta, Jabodetabek. Jabodetabek ini masalahnya ada 13 aliran sungai yang mengalir ke lewat Jakarta di Jabodetabeknya. Dan ini kalau tidak masalah tata ruangnya yang benar didorong, ini akan sulit. Nah tentunya PLN sebagai ini ya basis utama dari energi nasional, dan ini harus kita perkuat keseluruhannya. Jadi memang kita tangguh ini juga bagaimana kolaborasi tangguh. Dan ini masalah terkait tata ruang tentunya kita keseluruhan pihak. Misalnya setelah banjir Jakarta kita mendorong upaya untuk tim Satgas yang bisa bergerak bersama-sama terkait dengan tata kelola dari hulu Sungai Ciliwung. Kenapa hulu Sungai Ciliwung? Nah itulah salah satu penyebab banjir juga yang terjadi karena rusaknya wilayah di sana dan bagaimana alih fungsi lahan dan bagaimana tata ruang yang sudah tidak harus dikembalikan dengan yang baik, tapi tentu ini proses. Nah tentunya bagaimana kita mendorong ini untuk kita tangguh, kita bagaimana dengan satgasnya sudah ditetapkan, ini kita terus memantau secara periodik dalam tiap 3 bulan untuk bagaimana kita bisa memperkuat apa-apa perkembangannya, dengan sampai ada kemudian masih ada alih fungsi lahan lagi atau masalah tata ruang lagi. Jadi yang jadi repot adalah nanti terkait dengan banjir pasti akan terjadi masalah bahaya yang lain terkait dengan tidak hanya saat mati lampu, tapi tentunya ada korsleting atau mungkin ada yang terkena terkait ini aliran listrik dan lain-lain. Nah ini tentunya harus kita koordinasikan lebih lanjut dan upaya ini kita perkuat multi pihak memang.
Ya,
Jadi bukan hanya PLN, tapi seluruh pihak harus bertanggung jawab yang terkait ini. Karena pada saat kita menghadapi masalah, ya kan semuanya akan terdampak. Kita bisa melihat bagaimana Maret 2025, bagaimana luar biasanya banjir Jabodetabek ini melumpuhkan berbagai macam sendi perekonomian dan menyulitkan untuk bisa beroperasi kembali kan, ditambah lagi banyaknya korban jiwa dan korban yang lain, benda yang lain yang sangat berdampak. Nah ini kolaborasi itu tujuannya untuk tidak hanya di dalam masalah terkait dengan kolaborasi kalimatnya, tapi kata-katanya, tapi bagaimana upaya kita memperkuat pengurangan risiko bencana, membangun kesadaran masyarakat, bagaimana tata ruang, bagaimana ini juga terkait dengan kementerian lembaga lain yang terkait dengan masalah tata ruang, alih fungsi lahan, dan bagaimana kita mendorong untuk masyarakat bisa memiliki budaya tangguh bencana yang kuat.
Oke, baik, terima kasih Pak Andre. Tadi Pak Andre menyampaikan kolaborasi, saya tambahkan mungkin komunikasi juga ya Pak ya, antar pihak ya Pak ya, agar tiap masing-masing juga tahu begitu ya perspektif, kebutuhan dan apa yang menjadi tujuan dari masing-masing pihak, dan ini dikolaborasikan, dijadikan satu begitu. Tapi kuncinya adalah komunikasi antar stakeholder dan juga antar pihak-pihak terkait begitu ya. Oke. We only have a very limited time, maybe one questions for you each, Ulzi and Ian. So the next question is to you, addressed to you, Ulzi. Dari pengalaman UN Women di negara-negara lain, bagaimana perempuan dan komunitas lokal dapat berperan sebagai agen perubahan yang memperkuat ketahanan sistem ketenaga listrikan di tengah meningkatnya resiko iklim dan bencana? Apa yang perlu dilakukan oleh institusi seperti PLN agar perspektif gender dan inklusi sosial betul-betul terintegrasi dalam desain program, pengelolaan resiko dan juga penguatan ketahanan di tingkat komunitas?
Thank you very much for this forward-looking question. And just to continue from my earlier thought, when we look into the resilience outcome, it's what PLN is trying to achieve, and that is sustainability. Sustainability, predictability, so that our future generations, even our own children and even our own generation can fully benefit from all the great development that is happening both in the country, including through the support of SOE like PLN. So, and in this, pathway, when we look from the perspective of, okay, how do we get there faster than what we are in currently, is to really change our make a mental shift, because that's what was also said previously by Andres. It's really big shift. It's not incremental changes, it's the big mental shift that is required. And that big mental shift is really to understand and accept and institutionalize the voices from within the community in your institutional structure. From ASEAN experience, as well as from Indonesia experience, there are wonderful emerging practices of consulting with communities, bringing on board most affected communities, especially people who are most affected, like elderly, like children, like persons with disability. But usually, their voices are heard only in their capacity as users, end users, but not in their capacity as leaders. It's exactly the same when it comes to women. Women are mostly framed as the end beneficiary, someone who would be the recipient of whatever you have decided. But PLN practice shows something different. Once they are on board, but not on board because of specific initiatives, but because it is institutionally embraced and it is part of your vision, then of course the future is already here today. It's not tomorrow that we're trying to build. And for this one, there are three things that are emerging from global lessons learned. One is to bring into your own planning and budgeting systems the platforms of constantly engaging those who are not users in the regular situations, but who are usually deeply affected by different crisis situations, to be heard throughout your planning, implementation, monitoring, and budget decision cycle. That's number one. Secondly, it is about the culture change. This was also mentioned earlier as part of the adaptive leadership session. Bringing in the culture change requires constant work. And the culture change is not about agreeing to some specific actions today. It is about doing it constantly. So this culture change, to be embraced, has to start from the leadership, has to be supported by the voices and champions at all levels. So how do we embrace that? That is also the institutional strategy and the choice. And then the third part is also resourcing and capacitating all your workforce, but also partners to act openly together by dedicated, allocated funding. Because usually, funding for bringing the unheard voices to the leadership usually is not allocated. So this kind of funding is absolutely critical for, for PLN and many other similar companies to be able to achieve the results in a much faster, expedited manner. So these are the things I want to say. And in the concluding part, I loved the phrasing. I was just writing here. So PLN electrified Indonesia, right? I want to say PLN powered Indonesia, because you bring electricity, you bring other energies, but also with the human power together. So PLN,
please
power
give a round
Indonesia.
of applause. Thank you so much, Rosie. That's the advices and also the wisdom. Thanks. And I would like to proceed to you, Jan. So the question is the ekspektasi utama lembaga pembiayaan terhadap pengembang atau utilitas seperti PLN dalam menunjukkan kesiapan dalam mengelola resiko iklim dan mengintegrasikan gender equality serta social inclusion dalam proyek energi seperti apa? The first question. And the second, I would like to combine those two. Bagaimana proyek-proyek energi dapat dirancang agar lebih menarik bagi pendanaan internasional dengan tetap menunjukkan dampak yang kuat pada ketahanan iklim, lingkungan, dan masyarakat. This is gonna be our very last questions in this session, so please proceed, Jan.
Thank you for the questions. I will try not to be too long. It's difficult to be after you. Maybe three things. Regarding the expectations, I won't be too long. I won't to elaborate too much, but maybe the key expectation is we expect a comprehensive understanding of climate risk. Also, we talked about that. But second thing, very important, meaningful integration of gender equality and social inclusion. The acronym is JC. So expectation on the gender equality and social inclusion have evolved. It's not only, or it was maybe, but it's no longer about simple indicators or compliance. It is designing projects that are genuinely inclusive and socially sustainable. That's not the same level of complexity, but that's what we need now. So do not harm approach, that's the minimum, implying that no group is negatively impacted. But beyond, we look for integration of this gender equality and social inclusion consideration from design to implementation, use of gender disaggregated data to monitor outcomes, and concrete actions to improve inclusion. For example, through workforce policies, access to opportunities, targeted support to underserved communities. So the objective is to ensure that energy projects contribute not only to decarbonization, but also to an equitable and inclusive development. So that's the first part of your question. And regarding the way to have more attractive projects for international financing, maybe a couple of elements. So I mentioned that previously, but I repeat. The first, projects need to integrate climate resilience from the earliest stages. It's not an add-on. So it means incorporating climate risk into planning, into engineering design and financial structuring and operation and maintenance over the lifetime of the asset. The second thing is strong environmental and social standards. That's not an option anymore. So there are prerequisites for accessing international finance. And third, and that's also a lesson we have in Europe, we had in France and other countries, social acceptability is one of the main risks and bottleneck for the energy transition. Maybe I would stop there, and maybe one last more general comments. Thanking again the organizers for such an interesting event. We talk about principle, we talk about philosophy and understanding, but I'm pretty sure that all the people in the room are already convinced. The job we have probably is to convince outside again and again. So that's part of our job, of course, but that's something we have to have in mind, all of us. To cooperate, of course, that's what we do, that's what we want to do, but we have different angles, maybe different purposes on specific project, but the goal, and the president of PLN made it very clear, I guess, this morning, we work for the future generation, and it's now. So that was a way also to convey this general message, and of course, probably we can carry out this discussion afterwards. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you so much. Very appreciated, Jan. Please give a round of applause to our panelists here today. Thank you so much, Pak Evi Haryadi, Pak Edwin, Pak Andre, Ulzi, and Jan. Thank you so much for the insights, all the encouragement, all the optimism that we have to do this together. We have to collaborate more and to communicate more in my perspective and my point of view. And semoga berguna Bapak Ibu untuk sesi diskusi kita tadi. Sekali lagi kita berikan apresiasi. Saya Syarifah Rahma pamit undur diri. Terima kasih dan selamat siang.
Yes, please give a round of applause for our remarkable panelists and moderator, and we kindly ask you to remain on the stage because as a way to appreciate the time and expertise you have shared with us today, PLN would like to give a token of appreciation for our external panelist and moderator in the form of carbon credit certificate.
Ya, SPE GRK atau Sertifikat Pengurangan Emisi Gas Rumah Kaca atau Carbon Credit Certificate ini kami sampaikan sebagai tanda penghargaan atas partisipasi dan komitmen dalam mendukung offset emisi serta aksi mitigasi perubahan iklim. Baik, untuk yang pertama penyerahan kepada Bapak Andre Noto Hamijoyo selaku Asisten Deputi Pengurangan Risiko Bencana Kementerian Koordinator Bidang Pembangunan Manusia dan Kebudayaan yang diserahkan oleh Bapak Evi Haryadi selaku Direktur Teknologi Engineering dan Keberlanjutan PT PLN Persero.
Give a round of applause for Mr. Andre Noto Hamijoyo. And next we would like to invite Ms. Ozi Suren Jamsran from UN Women Representative Indonesia, a liaison for ASEAN. Oh, I'm so sorry. We're inviting Jan Matre, Country Director of French Development Agency or AFD.
Dan untuk selanjutnya, Kami persilakan kepada Bapak Edwin Nugraha Putra selaku Direktur Transmisi dan Perencanaan Sistem PT PLN Persero untuk menyerahkan kepada Ibu Ulzi Sroen Jamsran, UN Women Representative Indonesia and a Liaison for ASEAN.
Give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And last but not least, we would like to invite Syarifah Rama as the moderator of today's session, the news anchor of CNBC Indonesia, to receive the carbon credit certificate from PT PLN Persero. Berikan tepuk tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian atas panelis dan juga moderator kita yang luar biasa. Let's have a group picture together, all the panelists as well as the moderator. Yes, let's have a group picture.
Ya, kita lakukan
Oh, with the ladies in the middle. All right.
Yes. Ya,
Okay.
masih menata posisi ya, Bapak dan Ibu semuanya.
All right, give your best smile to the camera in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, one more pose. Give your best smile to the camera. 3, 2, and 1. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to invite you to return to your seat.
Baik, Bapak Ibu boleh beri tepuk tangannya sekali lagi untuk para panelis serta moderator kita yang cantik luar biasa ini. Baik, hadirin yang kami hormati, sampailah kita di penghujung acara Sustainability Day 2026.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Sustainability Day 2026 has come to an end. Kami mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh narasumber, undangan, dan peserta yang telah berpartisipasi aktif dalam kegiatan hari ini.
Ya, semoga apa yang telah kita bahas bersama dapat memberikan manfaat serta menjadi langkah nyata dalam memperkuat ketahanan iklim dan keberlanjutan di sektor energi.
Kami mewakili segenap penyelenggara kegiatan memohon maaf apabila terdapat kekurangan selama pelaksanaan acara.
Sampai jumpa di Sustainability Day berikutnya.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kami informasikan kepada seluruh tamu undangan bahwa kami telah menyediakan sajian makan siang dapat Anda nikmati di selasar sebelah auditorium, and we would like to invite all the VIP invitations to return to the Muara Karang meeting room to have lunch together. Once more, we would like to invite all the VIP invitees, VIP attendants to go to Muara Karang meeting room to have a lunch together with all the VIP and board of directors of PLN and the management of PT PLN Persero. Dan kami mengundang kepada seluruh tamu undangan lainnya untuk menikmati sajian makan siang di selasar auditorium yang ada di sebelah kiri ruang auditorium ini. Selamat menikmati.